Welcome to you all to the Monday, April 1st, 2019 meeting of the Falls Church City Council. We are delighted you all are here with us this evening. Before we get started, we had a very well-attended and exciting Women's History March on Sunday that Ms. Hardy and Ms. Connolly spent a lot of time working on. That was a great success. So anyway, I wanted to thank them for doing some great work. Very nice event. Mr. Shields, are you ready to get us started with the budget work session?
Yes, Mayor Tarter, members of council. On your agenda lists the areas of the budget that we'd like to cover tonight. And if you would allow, I'd like to change the order. And we would like to list it in this order. Have an update on the library first, then followed by Housing and Human Services, and then a discussion of the policy, the tax relief policy that's built into the budget. Then a briefing from Public Works, and then personnel, and then that would flow into a briefing on the school budget. And then at the end of the meeting, we have a closed session on the West Falls Church campus project, and the schools would like to attend that closed session as well. So with that order of business, if there's agreement on that, Ms. Carroll, would you like to come forward?
As she's doing that, I'm going to read a disclosure, as my colleague probably will as well. I make the following statement before City Council's consideration of the FY 2020 budget. My wife is an employee of the Falls Church City School Board, and therefore I'm a member of a group of 3 or more persons that may be affected by the FY 2019 budget. I can, however, participate in this matter fairly, objectively, in the public interest.
I make the following statement before City Council's consideration of the FY 2020 budget items. I am an employee of the Falls Church City School Board and therefore am a member of a group of 3 or more persons that may be affected by the FY 2019 budget. I can participate in this matter fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
All right. With that out of the way, welcome to you all, and what do you have to say?
So the library project update is going to will be brief. Given what happened at the last meeting, your direction was to go forward and get a guaranteed maximum price. So we are in the process of the first set of construction documents, which we will expect to have at the end of April. That'll be 65%. And then mid-May, we will have the cost estimate based on that 65% of the construction documents. We still expect to have a guaranteed maximum price by about September. We are also working on the temporary location plans, which include working on a layout, parking plans, and of course the collection. And that's where we stand on the library project.
All right, thank you. Any questions, comments? Question.
So, Ms. Carroll, as you go and you're getting the guaranteed maximum price, last time we talked about things that could be taken out. Are any of those things taken out? Or if my memory serves me, the direction was we don't want to value engineer the project till there's nothing there.
Correct. So we are moving forward with the understanding that City Council wants the streetscape in place and LEED Silver certification. So any items that go towards either of those things, we are maintaining within the scope of the budget, along with all of the items that sort of started the project, which was gaining more public space, bringing the building up to ADA compliance, and those items that were within the scope as well.
So then when we get a 65% drawing, guaranteed maximum price comes after that.
There's a next set of construction documents, which is 100%. I'm looking to Mike because just to confirm, 100% documents, and then it goes to guaranteed maximum price.
We'll have 3 more rounds.
So what's the timing then on when we think we're going to?
September. Guaranteed maximum price, September.
Okay.
So there'll be
and how
other.
many more times is the City Council going to have to vote to decide?
You won't have votes, but we would have touching of base, so you understand kind of where the cost estimates are. So the next time we'll touch base will be in May with costs for the 65% complete plans. And so the goal is to keep the council apprised as to what's happening as we go through. But the next actual council action would be to
Guaranteed maximum price.
on that guaranteed maximum price in September. So there would be no votes until that point.
So if it appears that the price is going up and up and up beyond what we have the bonding capability for, then what are our options for handling that?
Well, we will need to either reduce scope or increase the price. Those will be our options.
Those are our two options.
Yeah. And so the direction from the last meeting was, let's get better cost information
Right.
before we make those decisions. But the direction was, as Ms. Carroll said, not to de-scope on the things that the community cares deeply about. And so we're taking that direction and getting more refined cost estimates.
Okay. So we'll have a check-in again in May.
Right.
May
Okay.
20th.
Thank you.
Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. Whoa. I don't need that much emphasis. So if I remember my math correctly, we were at, the shortfall was 1.2 million, and then I think everyone seemed largely on board with using the VCs from Founders Row, which is around 300,000. Is that where we stand now?
Yes.
And generally, do we expect that at May and then September, the numbers will get better or more refined and just more certainty, or are they going to get worse?
I think what Joel Timmons, who is the project manager, said last time was that there's no guarantee, but that the guaranteed maximum price is a point at which that would be the final price. So there could be a change at 65%, there could be a change at 100%. And Mike might be able to talk a little bit more about that as well.
So the costing as we go forward will be much more refined. What the construction manager actually will do is he'll touch base with all of his subs. As the plans develop, they'll get better pricing. So at every stage that it moves forward, we'll have better pricing. And when we get to the end of the GMP, that will be the final price. And that's when council makes a decision what to do, move forward, find funding.
A part of that is
If we're over.
a decision on whether we want to definitely use the VC money or another source of revenue if we
Right.
wanted to make up the gap. Okay. Last time I had a question, I think, for Joel around what our burn rate is. So between now and September, how much more in soft costs we're going to spend each month to get to that final number? Do y'all have that tonight?
So the actual expenses to date are a little over 300,000, and we had $1 million about for this phase. So in terms of burn rate, I don't have that, how much we would expend. I would expect we have about 830,000 in.
You can spend up to $1 million in the soft cost phase. Thank you.
Mr. Snyder?
Thank you very much. When this topic last came up, I think I asked the city manager to get some numbers on alternative locations potentially for the library if we were to, say, buy a condominium interest in a new development. Have you gotten those numbers yet?
I'm working to get those numbers. I haven't had great cooperation from a third party where we need to get them, but let me persist and get those numbers.
Okay, this is very important because I want to again state that, well, first of all, how many square feet of additional space are we getting in this proposal at this point? And what's the total cost of the proposal that you know at this point?
6,600 square feet is the new addition. Our current space is 18.5. Budget would be, the referendum was 8.7 million, including the bond issuance fees. Right now, we're at 1.2 over the hard costs.
Okay, so what we heard at the last presentation was costs are going up, which will require either more money into this project. And by the way, I've supported this project from the beginning. That's not the issue. But the fact of the matter is that we're not going to get that many square feet at a very significant cost. And it seems to be getting worse rather than better. So I'm going to be very interested in exploring this third option as a way to provide more library at a lower cost. And I appreciate that not everybody's on board, but partly my job is to look at options. Right now, the way it's set up is we're going to look only at two options. really the original price and a lesser project, or the project that we would all, at one point have supported at a much higher cost. I'm very interested in exploring a third option as part of the decision-making process. So I just wanted to explain where I am going forward on that. I just want that data. I think that data is critically important because I think it will help make a better decision. So thanks very much for your work, and I look forward to both the numbers and hopefully better news in September. Thank you.
Mr. Z?
Thank you, Mayor. Wow. Talk about being large tonight. At what point do you think you'll be able to do an independent cost estimate on the scope and the construction? Or is there one not planned?
I didn't hear the first part of what you said.
Independent cost estimate.
Sorry, you talked and he talked at the same time. Oh, independent cost estimate.
Are you planning to do an independent cost estimate? Do you know what an independent cost estimate
Apart from the
is?
construction manager at risk?
Yes.
We had not planned on doing that.
So no ice. Can you come back the next time with an estimate of how much an ice would be? And how long it would take? And the CMAR, again, you expect that to be able to provide us with a market-ready price at the end of September? Is that correct?
Yes, that's what the schedule is.
Okay. Can you also, the second request is, as those of us that track the markets, as I'm sure the CFO is doing with the inversion of the yield curves, basically means that, we can count in months when we're headed into recession. So if that's true, and in September, that's another 6-7 months, say this thing goes out to bid for firm costs and we have all that in by the end of December, and you begin construction in the spring, so that puts us 12 months from now. Can you get an assessment from your CMAR of what the effect would be of a recession on the prices of things like HVAC, steel, price of labor, all that stuff? Do you understand the question? Okay, those two questions. Thank you.
Mr. Duncan, did you have something?
Just quick, thanks for asking that question, Mr. Z. I was going to ask the very same thing. The two things that have happened since we talked with you all last are the indication that interest rates are going to be soft, apparently. They're not going to raise them at the Fed for the rest of the year. At least that's the gossip. And so, yeah, I'd be curious to know what were our assumptions about at what rates we were going to borrow the money for this. Yeah.
Over 60 million for 4.5%.
So, as Mr. Z says, if we had to borrow that money today, what would we pay? That's not what he said. That's what I'm asking. If we
Good question.
If we're doing it today, we're within the range.
Okay, and so the estimate that he's sort of, I mean, who knows? How can you predict? But, I mean, what would it be if the economic conditions were as he suggested? That would be an interesting thing to know. Okay, and the other thing that's, of course, happened since y'all were here last was that we raked the City Hall project over the coals at our last meeting around the, the way that I described it in an email that I sent to one of my colleagues was we don't really have a cost overrun problem, in my view, as much as we have a process situation where we have very high expectations for the buildings that we're putting up, City Hall, library, school, and yet we don't, want to pay the full list price. We just don't. it's like we're going to buy a car and we want the fanciest car with all the options and we don't want to pay the sticker price. Understandably, that's our job, to try to, drive a hard bargain. But, the problem with driving a hard bargain is if it's too hard, then you end up sacrificing elements and features that you want. The de-scoping list that you had last time, it's like you'd buy the car and it wouldn't have, power windows or automatic transmission or whatever. And so I think what I'm hoping for with the library is that we can travel off of whatever experience that we've gained with City Hall to, set a price, and maybe there's a contingency percentage that's higher, as Mr. Z suggested, for the City Hall than you're thinking right now as a hedge. Hopefully we don't have to spend it. But one thing I would love to understand better is if the City Council votes a number, whatever that number is, I think we feel that, or at least I feel, that the people building a building that's exactly what they're going to spend at least. They're going to take, okay, well, they're willing to spend that, so we're absolutely going to charge them that. We would like that not to be the case. We'd like that number to be a number that would enable us to get a good project done within or a little less. So what's our relationship with our builder? Do we feel good about the fact that the people we're working with, when they start tearing things down and building things up, are going to treat us fairly and not, milk every last penny out that we've approved, but rather would try to come in underneath so that our contingency figure would be a true contingency and would not be one that we had to tap at, 25 or 30%, but would be something more like 10%. So I guess I would just like to know, as we go down the road and get closer, how do we feel about our communications, relationship, staffing, for the things that we're asking for? Is there a good relationship that would yield a project that would get us what we want for a fair price, not the 100% sticker price? So those are just a couple of thoughts that I had. Thanks.
All right. Are there any other? Mr. Lickenhouse?
Jenny, thanks. You guys coming in. So I've had a chance to work with you guys as the liaison to the library board, and I know that there are a number of folks here who've poured their heart and soul into this project, so we're all hoping for a positive outcome. Just a couple questions in relation to timing, because one, I don't think that our problem's going to get better. I think it's probably going to get worse between now and September in terms of the cost estimates. So I think everybody here needs to be prepared for that. In terms of the timing of where we are on the schedule, so if we get GMP in September, what's the timing? It's assumed that that's approved, figure out where to get additional money from, or figure out that you have to de-scope. I don't want to use the term value engineer, but more than likely be a de-scoping. What does that do from a timing standpoint related to construction? Are we still on schedule for what we had originally proposed, Mike?
Yes, we could. If we come close or at budget come September, we could actually move towards construction almost immediately, as soon as council approves it. If we don't, then we have to reevaluate and we have to look at our scoping and de-scope some of the items, then it would have to go back into the pre-construction phase and redevelop the GMP.
And remind me again of what the construction time frame is for the original project. Sorry, I'm losing my voice for some reason. The addition plus the renovation in place.
Allergies are getting to me too.
It's killing me. Yeah.
So 14 months is the duration.
If history's any indication, probably 18, right?
Normally it would have been 18. I think we did publish 18, and I think our CM said they could do it in 14.
Okay. And approximate time frame for having to hit the reset button for a de-scoping, if we had to go back to pre-construction, how long does that take?
It could take 3 to 6 months.
And just one additional clarification. So for hard costs are at 1.2 million. We had the VC amount of 300. We're at 900. Was there an additional amount above and beyond that we know about that known quantity in terms of over budget? The number 1.2 has been thrown around. Is there anything else sitting out there that we know about?
No.
So at this point, from what we know right now, it's essentially a $900,000 problem. Or there are some things related to streetscape and LEED certification that are not in that number.
Those were included.
That was included. So the $900,000 gap that we have right now includes the streetscape and the additional LEED certification.
Right, that was all the established goals in the project, yes.
Okay. All right. So all the discussion aside related to inverted yield curve and where construction costs are going, I think we may be staring at a slightly bigger problem. But we'll address that once we get additional details and make an informed decision around what that means. But all in all, I know that you guys have put a lot of time into this, and it's a good program. I just feel like we may have gone to voters with a request that wasn't matched up with the original vision and scope at this point. So, thanks.
All right, anything else? If not, thank you again. We look forward to your further updates and appreciate you coming out this evening.
Might
as well stay.
No, I mean, stay to talk about the budget, library budget.
Did you have anything for library budget?
Just, I mean, we're essentially staying flat this year. The good news that we have is that there's been an increase in state aid. So the General Assembly in Virginia, in Richmond, approved an additional $500,000 for all for all libraries in the state of Virginia. So our portion of that is about $7,000. So we'll go from 146 to about 153. For an increase, and the state aid monies pay for all of our materials, so books, audiobooks, periodicals, that sort of thing. And then there are just a couple other bullets, more of just what's going to happen, which is we're going to move into the temporary location, and that our physical collection will, of course, be reduced, but we will still have a collection size, and new books will be the primary part of the collection that goes. And then also some of the money that normally goes to our physical collection will be put into e-resources. So we're looking at streaming, particularly Canopy, and RB Digital has a streaming product as well. So we're looking at both of those as well to supplement everything that's going on.
Sure, Vice Mayor.
Will books be in storage?
Books, there will be books in storage.
So we're not going to get rid of all the books.
We're not going to get rid of all the books. Despite popular news that libraries are dying. It's not true.
So you're going to hold on to the books, and then when you move back into the new building, the existing collection and the storage collection will.
Right. So we'll get down to a collection size, which I refer to as the temporary collection size, because during the time that we're in the temporary location, we will be, of course, ordering new books and materials during that time. So those will, of course, take up space as well. Okay. So when we move back into the building, we'll be at about our collection size for the building size, which is around the 110,000 item.
Continue to expand the e-resources.
And continuing to expand.
Once you get into the new building as well.
Yes, yes. There's money set aside every year for e-resources.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right.
Just an operations question that relates to, I guess, the capital project too. So with both the high school, new high school, and City Hall, operational imperatives are influencing our, schedule of work on the new building. The schools need to move in at a very specific time, and so we have to do things, et cetera, et cetera. City Hall, we need to get out of our temporary rented quarters and get into City Hall, and that's constraining us to some degree. On your end, though, if you're in the temporary facility at TJ, there's nothing that's pushing you to leave there. If something happens with the library renovation and it turns out it is going to take longer than we think. It's going to take 18 months instead of 14. There's nothing operationally that is going to make you all extremely anxious about sticking around at TJ for a while, is there? Or is there?
So our MOU was signed, and we have the temporary location from July 15th of this year until December of 2021. So even if the project took a little bit more time or We didn't go in. I think we're still
17, so it's
fine. So
17
even if we,
months.
yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Ms. Hardy?
December 2021.
So it's like 2.5 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not 17 months, yeah.
Yes. Kim Callahan, our prior project manager, built in a lot of time into it. Because the original project had us phasing within the building. So the original project was actually 24 months. So I think she went ahead and just built that in just in case.
Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. On the soft cost questions we discussed earlier, so to set up kind of the temporary location, all the preparation for the move, is that being paid out of operating dollars or the soft costs for the capital project?
So within the capital project, there is an allotment for the move and for storage.
So we're spending that money now while we prepare for the potential construction starting this fall.
I don't think we've spent that money yet.
And I think you answered this over email for me at one point, but I still actually have gotten this question twice since then. Collection size, I think, my understanding is that the collection size actually is decreasing after the renovation, but to a size that we think is appropriate for the size of the library. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
So the collection size for the new building would be about 110,000, as I mentioned earlier. If we had stayed in the building and brought the building up to ADA compliance, we would have had to reduce even further, which is around 80 to 90,000 items. So we're actually seeing an increase with the addition as well.
Sorry, what was current circulation?
What is current circulation, or do you mean current collection?
Current collection, sorry.
The current collection size, we're actually at 108.
And then post renovation?
Post renovation will be at 110.
Thank you.
Referring back to your question, the original size of our collection before all this started and until this year has been 150,000. The board decided that in view of the space that we're getting in the new building and accounting for losses to ADA, we would reduce it to 110,000. So that's a fairly large reduction, but people in the Library of Virginia tend to assure us that that actually will increase our circulation, interestingly enough.
And actually looking at the numbers this morning, our circulation is up. So.
All right. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. Unless there's any other questions, thank you all again for coming out. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Mr. Shields, who's next?
Nancy Vincent with Housing and Human Services. You're going to be here for the duration.
All right, welcome. Get two microphones.
Get a good stereo going here. So good evening, Council. The big news in the Housing and Human Services budget this year, or for fiscal year 2020, was the contract increases that we had. And the city contracts with Fairfax County for a number of services. The contract for the Department of Family Services, for example, for things like food stamps, SNAP, Office for Children, disability services, adult and aging services, including adult protective services, Head Start, child care services and referral, benefits programs, employment services, supportive services related to obtaining and maintaining housing, foster care and adoption, Medicare, Medicaid, temporary assistance to needy families, response to calls from victims of domestic violence or sexual violence, stalking, human trafficking, crisis intervention, counseling, support groups, shelter to victims and survivors, prevention programs to residents who've been abused, and also to assist homeless families with transitional or permanent housing and shelter services. So there's a good array of services from the Department of Family Services. We also contract for the Children's Services Act, and that's basically to provide services to children who are in need of residential care, and the city covers everything except for the educational expenses for those children, and that's a very expensive service. There's also the Community Services Board that assists residents with mental health needs, with substance abuse issues and developmental disabilities. And then with the Health Department for the environmental and community health services. We also contract with Arlington County through this department for the juvenile and domestic relations court services. And that's the kind of the array of probation services and services to victims of child abuse and also domestic violence. And then the next story that I have is to talk a little bit about affordable housing. Excuse me, and even though there is not a budget impact because of the steady state budget to affordable housing in the city, as we've heard in the past, housing is more expensive, and you'll hear, if you haven't already from the assessor, that housing costs are going up, rental costs are going up, and there's a need to use housing to create an inclusive community. We are very fortunate to have the Miller House that is under construction and should be opening in about a month, and that's very exciting, and that'll provide housing for folks with intellectual disabilities. We also have a new program at Aurora House, and the pilot year is completed now, and that's to provide independent living services to older girls, young women who are between 16 and 20 and learning how to live on their own, and to provide a range of services. And there's been a big increase in demand for that. That's filling a gap that we have. And that service is provided to Alexandria, Arlington, Fairfax, and Falls Church residents. And it started out with 2 residents, and we've done 3, and could do more with that program. And so I have more information, but I'll go ahead and open it up to you and answer any questions that you all may have.
All right, thank you very much. There's a lot of good programs happening in the city. We appreciate all the good work you do, Ms. Hardy.
Thank you, Nancy, for you and your team's work on all the important things happening in April, especially the Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Activities and Sexual Assault Prevention Month. So when looking through the budget, a large part of our HHS costs are contractual things that we outsource to Fairfax or Arlington. It looks like with Aurora House and JDR services, those are decreasing because of utilization going down in those areas, which is generally good news, not to have as many kids needing, in the court system. On the other hand, the other costs we have, like the public assistance ones, the community service boards, those are all contractual. Do we know what our utilization rates are for those programs? Because those costs are going up, which I understand is because they're just contracts we've negotiated with Fairfax and Arlington. Do we know what our utilization or usage rate for those are, and how that compares to other jurisdictions? I imagine, for example, we're not immune to mental health or substance abuse or other issues, but I'm curious, because we are paying pretty large bills, whether the utilization, essentially whether we're paying more per kind of usage, those are decreasing as well, and especially benchmarked against other areas.
So for some of them, we do know utilization. For a lot of the services, we don't, and that's a lot of what goes on is confidential, and but we do. And without being able to give you the exact numbers now, our costs, for example, for the Community Service Board, our costs per resident are higher than the cost per resident in Fairfax County. But we pay based on population, and what we're paying for is kind of capacity. If you look at capacity, our residents have the ability to access the whole array of services that the Community Services Board provides. So it's an important service. It's much more cost effective than if we had to provide the service ourselves or to independently contract for that service. But you ask a good question, and we do pay a little bit higher price than the county residents do if we look at it per person.
Absolutely, I think it definitely is more cost effective to outsource it. I'm just curious whether, because the costs are quite high, whether we've actually ever had discussions about when negotiating the contracts to actually look at historical utilization to project future utilization rather than just, here's your share based on per capita, especially if we think our usage rates are pretty low. I don't know whether that's been a topic of discussion for those contracts.
I do look at utilization,
Okay.
and do think about it, and I'm very confident that the deal we're getting from Fairfax County and the level of service we're getting Fairfax County is a good one, and our residents are well served by that. But I will continue to look at that. We do always have an option of contracting elsewhere, or contracting privately, or providing the services ourselves. I mean, these are mandated services, so we have to provide them to our residents. But the way that we provide them can be, open. For now, I'm very satisfied with the work of Fairfax County.
To turning discussion to my favorite topic, affordable housing. So I noticed that other than the Miller House, there's nothing in this operating budget kind of dedicated to affordable housing. And we haven't really replenished our affordable housing fund for many years now. Given that obviously every year is a tight budget year, I guess what are our options? What would staff recommend if we wanted to allocate more money? Like, do we need to look at new sources of revenue? One idea we've also talked about is doing the cash conversion from VCs, from private economic development projects. And I know staff is supposed to be working on that conversion formula. What are the other options that we should be considering so that we can actually make a more concerted effort on affordable housing?
So we really don't have, for example, low-income housing in the city. We do have one affordable dwelling unit that we buy down through the Housing and Human Services budget to provide that apartment for a lower-income family. So instead of being at affordable to a family at 60% of the area median income, it's affordable to a family at 40% of the area median income. And we do that by subsidizing that rent for that family. So an option would be to expand that program beyond the one household. And it's not a huge expense in terms overall budget. It's about $5,000 a year to do that. So I would recommend that. We do have the Fields of Falls Church, which is a tax credit property that has 96 homes there, and those tax credits will expire in 2026. And we need to start looking at what we could do to preserve that property as affordable, and that again is affordable to families who are up to 60% of the area median income. And there's ways to do that. One of the things that they've asked for is changes to density, to have some inclusionary zoning, and that could help to kind of make that property more affordable. Other things we could do are look at accessory dwelling units or accessory dwellings, for example, as a means to provide more affordable housing in the city. And that's often used by aging parents or by students who've grown up and gone to college and come back and don't necessarily want to live in the home with mom and dad, but would like to live still in the city and the place where they grew up. And so that may be an option for those families. So I mean, there's kind of an array of things that can be done to provide more affordability in the city. Is that getting to the question that you asked?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So yes, and that all good options that we should be looking at. I was thinking more like operating budget options. Like, what do we need to allocate in the operating budget to start preparing for the fields to help more families if we were to buy down their subsidized rent.
Okay.
dollar amounts, like, this might be and this is probably a better question for Wyatt as city manager. What are the trade-offs we should be looking at if we wanted to do more in this area?
So what, in terms of what staff has recommended to me, which is not in the budget, would be setting aside funds for the preservation of existing affordable housing. And I think there's been numbers, in the $150,000 to $200,000 a year to help build a fund that would do that. I think this is going to be a discussion that will be in the comprehensive plan about looking holistically about how we can preserve affordable housing or create new affordable housing. There'll be strategies along with the objectives, and from that, I think then, subject to appropriation, we would be looking for money to carry those strategies out. My thinking has been, let's do that strategic work first and then have the budget follow from it. And that's why there aren't dollars in this budget.
When are we going to have that discussion then?
So we have a work session in May for the comp plan chapter, and so that will be right after budget. I think it's the May 28th meeting, if I recall correctly.
All right, Mr. Duncan?
Yeah, I would just like to emphasize my interest in this issue also. And I think others on council have experience. And it's been about 10 years since we took a real hard bite at trying to increase our affordable housing stock through construction of a new building, which is another option. I don't think it was necessarily mentioned. The ADU option, finding it within ourselves the capacity to dedicate a certain percentage of tax rate, whether it's a penny or not, or perhaps looking at transient occupancy tax as a source of revenue. All these are things that we should discuss as soon as we possibly can after this budget's finished with, because 2026, you said, for the fields, that's only 7 years away. And, the library, we've been talking about the library for a long time, but we've been talking about it hard for going back to 2013. So that's 6 years, and we're still talking about it. And we're still a couple of years out from actually going into it. So we really need to get started before the end of this year with a strategy and a funding plan for affordable housing if we are going to be of any assistance in the field situation, I think, come 2026.
All right, thank you. Any other comments?
I just want to add onto your comments, Mr. Duncan. And so the other thing that we need also is to think about home ownership opportunities. And we talk about the fields as a rental property, and we absolutely want to preserve that as affordable, but we also want to look at home ownership. And then as we're talking to developers, larger homes, so even with apartments, 2-bedroom homes for families, we have I think sufficient number of 1-bedroom apartments in the city now that are affordable. And so it would be great to think about larger units and then the lower income units as well.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your presentation this evening and your fine work throughout the year.
Thank you.
All right. Who's next, Mr. Shields?
So we're going to go from this discussion to discuss senior tax relief. And there has been an ordinance that's been prepared, but it hasn't really gone the rounds internally yet, so that was not put in your packet. But the goal was to discuss what option 3 is, what's built into the budget, so there's awareness of what that option is, what the policy question is, and then go from there.
Right. So I distributed, before the meeting started, you should each have a sheet that looks like this. It's a little summary sheet where we tried to condense the recommendations of the tax working group, or tax relief working group, to one sheet. So I apologize, that's about as condensed as I could get it. And, in the first column, program element, then the current program, our proposed changes, the rationale, and the impact. And basically, we're recommending option 3, if you remember your spreadsheets that I handed out. And option 3 would provide 100% relief to people in the HUD AMI area median income from 0 to 40%, which would be up to $37,250 for household income. It would provide 75% relief for people in the 41 to 60% AMI, which would be from $37,250 up to $56,280 for their household income. And then 50% relief for people with up to 80% AMI, which would be the $56,000 to $62,000 a year in household income. Above that, they would qualify for deferral only. We're also recommending the 0% interest on deferral. Currently, it's the prime rate as of January 1. That's the interest people are charged on deferral. That interest is the #1 reason that seniors list for not deferring their taxes. They don't want to pay interest, and they don't want to, leave a tax bill, quote unquote, with the accrued interest for their heirs after they're gone. So we thought that would be a great thing, and also our neighbors all offer 0% interest, and we thought that would be a great way to encourage people to defer their taxes by lowering that interest rate to 0. Those are the 2 highlights, basically. I did some more number crunching because a couple of people expressed interest in how can we, get more deferral, and also, what does it cost us versus what does it save us if, we're offering 100% relief to people. So the average assessed value of homes in the program is $525,000. Taxes on $525,000 home at the current rate is about $7,100 per year. So for those people who qualify for that 100% relief category, we would be relieving about $7,100 a year. The average length of time a senior citizen is in the program, or remains in the program once they get in the program, is 10 years before they sell, move, or pass away. I think Mr. Duncan had asked about, the cost, like what are we saving versus what are we spending? So if you look at keeping a senior in their home for 10 years, and versus, flipping that home, someone buying it, flipping it, and a family with, let's say, 2 children move in, 2 school-age children, and we know now that it costs our cost per pupil for educating those 2 kids is, almost $20,000 a year. Let's round it up, $20,000 a year. So $40,000 a year to educate 2 children over that 10-year span. Versus the $7,100 a year, the difference is about $21,000 per year per household. So versus, keeping the senior in their home at $7,100, for the 100% relief versus, and I'm just talking about the school cost, the education cost of a family with 2 children, which is, $40,000 a year. So we're talking, roughly $21,000 a year. Per household. So that's, if you think of it in terms of that, that's pretty significant. One of the things that was noted was that back to the deferral, using their existing pool of applicants, and we give some of those people, who are now deferring their taxes 100% relief. The deferrals could actually decrease by this program, or what we're hoping is that deferrals will increase once that interest rate is dropped to 0. That might bring more people into the program. But there's just no way of knowing that. And one other thing I wanted to say was that currently we're deferring about $40,000 per year. Our regular tax relief is about $140,000, and then the veterans tax relief is about $100,000. So what we're proposing, again, using the existing pool of applicants, what we know is out there, tax relief would increase to about $265,000 a year. Deferred taxes would be about $15,000, and then the veteran tax relief would be about $105,000. So the committee, the working group, feel feels pretty strongly about increasing that, relief to 100% for those people in the lowest category. We looked at the deferrals. The only other way we could think of to increase participation in the deferral was to narrow those income bands and sort of force people to defer as opposed to relief. And if you look at our neighbors, they're offering 100% deferral. Arlington, it's up to like 56,000 in income. Fairfax is 52,000. City of Fairfax is about 45,000, and I think Alexandria is the lowest at 40,000. So we're still, at our 100% deferral proposal, we're still lower than our neighbors at the 37,250 in income. So we really don't recommend lowering it any further than that, is what it boils down to. So that's the basic outline. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or if we want to talk about it.
All right, I imagine we do have a few questions. Why don't we hear what they are? Mr. Z.
Thank you for all this work that
Sure.
But closer? Okay, is this close enough? Thank you for all the great work you've done on this and the working group as well. I think that you have done as much as you can representing the interests of the city, the taxpayers, as well as the senior citizens who are in the market for this relief. I noticed here that, having said everything that you've done with regard to the conditions and the comparison to the our joint jurisdictions, that and how this brings us in consistency with them with regard to dropping the interest rate to zero, is that the total fiscal impact is $100,000 more than we're currently paying, and the pool of people that would be affected would be larger, even though you don't know quite how many would apply yet. I think it just needs to be emphasized again to everyone here that who's listening that not only is it a good thing that we keep our senior citizens in the house that they want to live in, they've been for a long time, and presumably they have paid taxes to put their own children and other children through a system, and this is not exactly a reward, but it's our recognition that if they want to stay here, they can. And going back to your point here, that if it costs $20,000 just for school age children, if there are 2 children, that's $40,000. That the relief at $7,000 is much less than would be paying, and or I guess more appropriately asking every one of us sitting around this table and in the audience to pay as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Hardy.
Thank you, Jody. I think I was the one that the last work session that asked you to do this extra work, so thank you for helping break it down in these terms. So overall, I think our original goals was how do we help more people and do it as equitably as possible and ultimately keep seniors in their homes longer, which I think selfishly is good for both the city's social and financial reasons. And I think this largely accomplishes that. I think there's probably still iterations we can do, but I think it makes sense to kind of go with this option and see what happens. So to that end, given that we've allocated $390 to this, so if this rolls out and we get a lot more demand than we expect, what do we do? Is it first come, first serve? Is it, do we allocate based on need? If it, the demand exceeds the $390, what's the process?
Well, in the past, we have at times, gone over what the budgeted amount was, and we have to meet that. I mean, if they qualify for the program, they get the relief. So then we have to, sort of figure out where, then that becomes another budget issue.
In the federal government, this would be considered an entitlement, so if you qualify, you get the benefit.
So then we just have to find money in the budget to make up for it. We can't kind of stipulate that this is what we've got, and if it's
right, we
prioritize based on need or something.
I will say this, every projection that we made, we were very conservative. we sort of overestimated on the number of people. Like, if you look down at your spreadsheets, the area in green were those people who are new applicants this year. We don't know yet what their income is or if they're going to qualify, but we sort of assumed they'd all qualify at 100%, just because we wanted to, be very conservative and in our estimates so that we would not go over the budgeted amount. So I'm pretty confident in our numbers, but we'll see.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
All right, other comments? Ms. Connolly? And all right, one of you two go.
Mr. Snyder.
Mr. Snyder?
So, I'm just trying to put all these pieces together, and we have a library project which I support, which is going up in price. We have a request for affordable housing to designate 1 or 2 pennies in the future. I now have senior tax relief going up. And I'm putting all these together, and I have to express some concern about whether we're going to remain competitive with surrounding jurisdictions when you put all this together. So, while each one of these programs is thoroughly justifiable, it begins to paint an unsustainable picture. So I want to make sure that we achieve the right balances. Now let's go to the senior tax relief. Is there anything that prevents the senior from having grandchildren claim that as a residence for school purposes?
If they had their grandchildren living there, presumably the parents would be living there. I mean, and then they'd have to claim that income, the income of the parents that would be in the home. So that would conceivably prevent them from qualifying.
Right, but it's conceivable that the supposed savings at school costs may not materialize in whole or in part. And that's the point I want to make. I've never minded deferment, but basically what you're doing is you're allowing the taxpayers are paying for an asset that certain people then pass on to their, or sell, and the taxpayers have paid for that. So anyway, I'm supportive of looking at this, and I appreciate the working group's work, just like I appreciate the work the library is doing, and I appreciate the affordable housing advocacy. But when you put it together with the additional capital costs, I think we have a big picture issue which we've got to keep our eye on, and I know we will. But each one of these has to be seen in the context of everything else. That's my only point. But thanks a lot. Again, I do prefer deferment over a straight gift, if you will. But I understand that may not be where we collectively end up. But thank you for your work.
Sure. Thank you.
Ms. Connolly?
Thanks, Ms. Acosta.
Sure.
This is really helpful, having looked through all those charts for several months.
Yes.
This is very helpful. Thank you
Good,
for those
good.
of us that are better with words than numbers. One of the things that we talked about as part of the working group was to make sure that the people that are in the program now, are we making sure they remain there? Will they all remain there, or will some become ineligible because we've changed some of these limits?
There's one person that their home is worth, it's more than 125% of the average assessed value in the city. So they would still qualify for deferral, but they would qualify for deferral at 100%. They would not receive any relief.
Okay. And then everyone else fits within these parameters?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Thank you. So I echo Councilman Snyder's sentiments. I've never been one for full relief. Deferral, I don't have a problem with. I obviously support the idea of diversity amongst residents in every sense of the word. However, our assessment base is too small. Our population is too small, and our assessment base is too heavy on the residential side to open up what I think can be somewhat of a slippery slope in terms of unmanageable cost. I mean, I truly believe that. I frankly, and educate me on this, but I struggle to see, when you're talking about a $525,000 house, which to some extent would be paid down because someone wouldn't be able to refinance it to pad themselves, because that would put them over a qualifying asset and income limit. So you effectively have a $500,000 asset, which will be passed along to generations. What would be the difference between a deferral and full relief? I mean, why wouldn't we offer just a deferral, even at 0% interest? What's the, and it's not like a gotcha question, it's not the rhetorical question. I mean, what is the social policy that we're effectively trying to accomplish by offering both? So we're talking about $7,100 a year over 10 years versus a relief, and having both of those in place at the same time. What's the difference?
Well, earlier when I said the number one reason that the seniors don't want to defer was that interest rate, the number two reason was they want the home to be free and clear to pass on to their heirs. So they cite both of those things, but the number one reason being the interest. So if you're only offering deferral, then I think you're not going to retain them. I think they're going to sell and move.
I look at that as a personal decision,
right?
Frankly,
right.
If folks want to live in the city and they enjoy the benefits, and when it comes to benefits, I think it's important to note we spend a lot of time talking about our schools, which are fantastic. We've got a number of folks here from the school board. And our schools are fantastic, and a lot of people move here for that. But our property taxes don't just pay for schools. I mean, they pay for a lot of city services. They pay for the library. They pay for our community services board. They pay for this community center. So the idea that someone ages out of having kids in the school system and that they've effectively, paid for every benefit that they have of living in Falls Church is a bit of a fallacy, in my opinion, because I certainly want to age in place here. And enjoy all the benefits of this community beyond just the fantastic school system. So it concerns me in light of all of the reasons we've talked about tonight with rising costs to open up a relief program that could have unintended consequences. And you talk about $100,000 here, $100,000 there. I mean, we're trying to solve a $900,000 problem for the library. And that doesn't sound like a lot, just like $100,000 here for a relief program doesn't sound like a lot. But $452,000 a year is a penny on the tax rate. And so that's considerable. So it's not that I'm not in support of having folks age in place, and I see the benefit of a diverse, rich community, again, in every sense of the word, but I get concerned when we talk about relief. We are all very lucky, I think, to live in a community like this, and when you look at the value of the homes that we have and how much of that contributes to the assessment base, which is driven almost 70% from residential. We don't have the benefit of a Fairfax or an Arlington where 60% of their property tax base is commercial. And we haven't achieved that yet. We hope to get there through some of these larger projects like a Founders Row or a West End project or a Broad in Washington and everything else that comes down the pike. But at this point, any kind of shock to the system related to a program that we open up that effectively takes away the lifeline to pay for all of the things that we're talking about right now during budget season it gives me quite a bit of heartburn, to be honest with you. I'd like to look at every opportunity for us to encourage folks to want to stay and move here at all ages and all income brackets, but the idea of a full relief when we have a deferral program, which whether people want to take advantage of that or not, if you're living in a $500,000 home that's going to increase in value, to me that seems like an option that I would certainly embrace, regardless of how old I am. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Connolly, did you go already? Or? Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Duncan.
Thank you. It's very interesting to have a philosophical debate about these questions, and I have my own views about the value of community for all generations, and, we'll skip the campaign speeches, but it's the dollars and cents that sends me in support of what you've mapped out here for just the reasons that you've gone over. I mean, it's just a matter of fact that if we can encourage people who have finished putting their kids through schools here to stick around longer, we're going to come out on the plus side as a city in a big way. I mean, I understand that there are other things that our taxes pay for besides schools, but it is, a prime driver of our costs. So I look at the math the way that you laid it out, and I see $71,000 over 10 years, or that person sold their house, and let's say they sold a $500,000 house that got torn down and $1 million house got built, and that $1 million house is paying $13,000 in taxes. I mean, that $1 million house maybe even pays for one of those school kids that's going to live in it, because there's going to be at least one, certainly two, probably two, and maybe three. At any rate, all you have to do is run the numbers out and figure out that as a community, we're coming out dollars and cents wise way ahead if we can do things. And it's not the only thing we're doing, too. I think Mr. Littenhouse is correct to point out that development is a very key part of this. I mean, the people that I talk to say, you know, my kids are graduating from high school and I'm thinking about moving out, but I see you guys are working on a project that's going to bring movie theaters within walking distance of my house. I'm willing to stick around here for that. That's the kind of amenity that, you know, makes this community attractive to me. It's just not the only thing we're doing, but it is, I think, one tool that we could try at least, which leads me, sorry for the long speech, to a question, which is there anything in this, if the slope does get slippery, that we can't take a look at it after 2 or 3 years and revise the numbers, the income eligibility, the percentage? I mean,
No, we can always revisit it. If, you know, if all of a sudden we found out that we were going over, you know, the budgeted amount by a lot, or, you know, more than 1 year, we can absolutely
okay,
revisit
well,
it.
I think, thanks for that. I mean, I think everybody on council would be very keenly interested in maybe more updates on how this program is going
absolutely.
once it's implemented, rather than, you know, big surprise at budget time that the manager springs on us. You know, we'd like quarterly reports on, well, maybe that's too often, but, you know, track your application process so that we know
Sure.
how things are working out, because it is, you know, I mean, it's an experimental program. It's like the development we're doing. I mean, to some degree, that's an experiment too. That's the good thing about what the councils that I've been serving on, that we're willing to try some things, that there's some risk involved, but we think that we're doing it in a way that, you know, is carefully researched, and there's every expectation that it's going to yield some good outcome, but we are going to watch it very carefully. And then finally, on Mr. Snyder's question, which was interesting, about the grandkids living in, you know, grandma's apartment or house, without disclosing individual details, but you know with some granularity the people who are in the program now. Are you able to say whether that is something that you see now? Do you see a lot of folks who are like 65, 70, who have multi-generational situations with school kids? Is that part of the mix?
No, we've not seen that. And I think the schools also do a pretty good job of tracking where those kids live. You know,
to make sure that they're not just being
right.
dropped in there during the week by
Right.
somebody who lives outside the city. I mean, that's
exactly right.
So in other words, again, you'd be able to, with the cooperation of the school system, monitor that pretty closely. And if that was getting to be a problem, then obviously we need to do something
right.
different.
Right, correct. And this is a small community. We do know the people who are in the program. You know, I know where they live. I've been to their homes.
And just
some of
to,
them.
that's good answer. And just to reiterate, I mean, the numbers that we're using for income eligibility are less generous than every other jurisdiction around us, Fairfax City, Arlington, et cetera. So in the program that we're proposing, we're being conservative in the numbers that we're using. So
Yes.
okay. All right, well, I think that's enough for me to want to go ahead with this when we get it before us here in May, I guess it's going to be, right? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Yep. Jody, I take it the deferral option versus the relief, it's in either or?
They can do both. Like if they get relief for 50% of the, you know, those people who are in that category, say they get 50% relief, they can also defer the balance. And we have people who do that now.
What are the total number of folks that are in the deferral program versus folks that take advantage of the relief, and then where's the overlap?
Right now, I think there's 9 people who do both. We don't have anyone who's deferral only right now. But we have 9 people who receive some portion of relief and then defer the balance. I think it's 9. Let me check. Yes, 9 people.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, the only comment I would make to Councilman Duncan's response is that when it comes to programs like this, they're very difficult to walk back. So while I appreciate the notion that we would get together and just make a decision, a business-minded decision, if this went sideways on us, I don't think it's that easy. And so I look at votes like this for programs like this, for things that once you enact them, they will be there for quite some time, which is the same reason that we've been having discussions around funding affordable housing through the budget for years after that was removed. So I don't look at it as such an easy about-face turn. Again, I still have major concerns, fully in support of the deferral option, even be in support of a 0% interest for the city, but I've significant concerns over the relief portion of this, as well as what it would mean in the future, regardless of us reevaluating also some of the instances for folks to potentially take advantage of that beyond what we've initially seen here, and the impact that would have to our budgets. And I would also raise the issue that folks in the city pay more than just property taxes. I mean, there are taxes at every turn, and people spend at different levels in different places, and I think that gets lost on folks. We talk about schools and we talk about property tax, but we don't talk about all of the other tax people pay when they go and patronize these restaurants and bars and shopping centers and have folks come in town to visit the kids. They're maybe staying at a hotel, a transit occupancy tax. And so it shouldn't be lost on anybody that property tax, about 50% of our budget, and yes, it's a considerable portion of it goes to pay for the schools, but folks pay a lot of different taxes around here, start businesses around here, and that shouldn't be lost on anybody either.
All right, other comments? I wonder if I could just ask you, it seems like there's two kind of arguments here. One is an equity, kind of fairness issue. The other one is sort of financial planning. It makes good financial sense. With respect to the latter, I wonder if there's any empirical data. I mean, you were sort of mentioning or implying that, well, if people don't get the relief, they're just going to move out of town. Is there any, I imagine there are studies somewhere in this country that describe the impact of abatement, deferrals, et cetera, on people's behavior. I wonder if it would be possible, maybe before our next discussion on this topic, just to see if someone could do a little bit of research to see if, in fact,
Sure.
What evidence there is out there. I mean, I think otherwise we're just sort of
deferral versus abatement.
Deferral, abatement, or nothing.
Okay.
You know, how that sort of impacts people's behavior. I'm sure
Okay.
there are communities throughout this country.
I know that Arlington did a very thorough year-long study. They brought in a national consultant, so I'll look more closely at what they did to see if I can find something there.
I think that would be interesting and inform our discussion a little bit.
Okay.
Unless there are any other questions, thank you again for all
Sure.
the good work and the group's work. Yes, of course.
Mr. Shields, do we need to approve this before we put it in the budget? Is this two separate things we have to do?
It is two separate things you need to do. So what is in the budget is an increase of $45,000 plus $16,000. So a
Right, 63.
$63,000 increase over what we're currently allocating for senior tax relief. And that's based on option 3. So if there's a desire to go to a different direction, the opportunity to have that discussion would be at markup, which is next week. But the ordinance itself then would follow immediately after that.
So we don't have to approve the ordinance before the budget, but
Hey,
right in the same
You don't
time
have
frame.
to. But
Okay.
we our goal was to bring it to you during the budget cycle. I think we missed this meeting, and so we just need to move it to you so you can see it as quickly as possible. But I do think the policy question really needs to be settled first before we start looking at the details of what the ordinance says. But
Ms. Hardy?
Just a quick thing. I think, Jody, one of the things you're recommending is changing from calendar year to fiscal year. So either way, we got to decide this by May or June if we want it to be implemented for the coming fiscal year, right?
Right,
for the December tax bill.
December
Oh,
tax
so
bill.
not this coming, not July 1st.
Not the June tax bill, the December tax bill.
Last year, we upped it a little bit already in anticipation of some changes.
Right.
Is the money just sitting there because we didn't
It
implement new
was
program?
unused, yeah.
$5,000 built into it for relief, and 20 is proposing to increase it by 63,000 more.
So the unused amount from 2019, though, could be buffer if we see high utilization this time around. Is that, or is it redeployed in other things now.
Well, there's been no policy changes, so,
So, yeah.
you know, if the policy gets changed, the first time we will know really how it's working out is in December.
Because we upped the amount allocated to the program and we didn't make the program more generous or restricted. We didn't make the changes. We weren't using that extra money, right?
Right.
But it doesn't carry forward automatically, so there would need to be a separate action to carry that forward, and that would be a year-end action.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you again, Mr. Z.
Mayor, I just want to just reiterate that this is not an easy policy decision to make. I'm fully aware of what Mr. Lickenhouse is talking about, and also mindful what the city manager said, that once we enact an entitlement, entitlements are forever. And so I would ask those that are listening in that have a strong sentiment either way, that you know who we are on City Council. Please send your comments to the city clerk one way or the other, and I'm sure it'll be distributed. We really need to have your opinion on this before we go ahead and do something that we would either celebrate or regret. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Mr. Shields, who's up next?
Next up is Mike Whitfield for Public Works, then after that, Personnel, and then Schools.
All right. Well, come on down, Mr. Oh, there you are. All right.
I'm still here.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. I'd like to go through this briefly and give you an overview of Public Works budget. I want to start out with saying we do have, excuse me, 17 cost centers in Public Works, about 45 employees, so it is somewhat of a complex department. Starting out with our city facilities, we have about $300,000 in pay-go funds. We have capital investment in 11 of our city buildings. The road and sidewalk spot improvements is a excuse me, a new program. It has about $100,000 in this new fund, and this new fund is something that can provide pedestrian crossings, signs, sidewalks, anything that council or citizen request would come to us with. We'd prioritize, and then we'd put estimates to those and try and get all of these accomplished within that fiscal year. As far as the transportation grant development, we have $100,000 in new funding. This is going to assist us in doing some pre-scoping and scoping and estimating, which will help us with our CIP program as well. And in the West Falls Church Economic Development Project, we have approximately $5.2 million in a sewer line project. This will accommodate the capacity needs both for the new high school as well as the 10-acre site. And I'll get into the sanitary here a little bit later. I'll give you an update on that. Stormwater utilities. Some of our goals this year obviously are to meet federal mandates on water quality and mitigate some local flooding. We do have some projects in the work right now, Ren's Branch, Harrison Branch, and so we're looking at ways to help mitigate some of these issues that are ongoing with flooding. So we have some ideas. We have a program that we're getting ready to reevaluate and reprioritize what the needs are for the city. In our 6-year CIP program, we have about $18 million. $8 million of that is in the local stormwater projects, and $10 million in potential grant-funded projects. The stormwater fee, there is no increase this year. It's about $18.36 per 200 square feet, and so that's $255 per year per home. In the sanitary sewer itself, the 6-year CIP program, which is $21 million, $11.3 million in treatment plant projects, $4.5 million sewer pipe rehab, $5.2 the West End sewer line project. Again, there is no rate increase. On the sanitary sewer side, we do have a model of the entire city. We know what our complete build-out is. That includes the small area plans. And so what we have is a combination of As developments come online, we ask that they improve capacity for their portion of it. When we get downstream, we do have some pipe bursting, and that will increase the capacity as well. So that program will be ongoing. So we do have a program which is very well vetted for the sanitary sewer. And we also include our lining, so we line the pipes as well in that program. And lastly, our solid waste. Our solid waste recycling, I know there was some questions that came up, and one of those is what are we going to do with the increase of recycling? So it does cost us approximately $36,000 a year to recycle, and I think I just heard Prince William say that they no longer will be taking glass. So I'm not sure what that's going to mean for us in the future, but right now we do pay that additional cost for the recycling.
All right, thank you very much. Do we have questions, Mr. Z?
So just playing off of your comments with respect to solid waste and recycling, I do see on page 153 here that you're saying it's costing an additional nearly 7% per year to recycle, and I do agree that it is a huge problem before us that people the city in particular have gone out of the way to try to separate the waste streams so that things can be recycled or not, but we understand the whole landscaping of recycling has changed dramatically, and I'm looking forward to a discussion based on data in the future on what it is that we should be doing, there's discussion about Fairfax bringing up a what do they call that stuff, cullet, where they grind the glass up and then put it back and used for aggregates in roadway. But they haven't brought the plant up, so we can't actually depend on that yet. I want to ask your departed employee, Mr. McGuff, to get cracking, get with the program, get this thing going quicker. Also on page 158, you've made the statement that it costs you approximately 112,000 gallons of fuel, E10 and B20 biodiesel annually, and if you just roughly calculate that $2.50 to $3 a gallon for, I don't know what you pay for it, maybe you pay tax on it for the fuel, but it is conservatively estimated about $300,000 for just fuel alone. And so if you were able to convert some of our fleet to electric vehicles, I think that cost would go down dramatically. We could see savings. Of course, that would mean a whole new paradigm of mechanics that would have to work on. Arguably easier to maintain electric vehicles than diesel or gas, but that's a bridge we have yet to cross. So thank you for that. And finally, on page 230, I think it is, I want to thank the CFO and city manager for breaking out the amount of contribution from developers for the stormwater fee that we've asked for in voluntary concessions. We're not able to deploy in trees around the city. So I look forward to using those funds usefully. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hardy.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mike, for your team. I know that you guys have a large team of people that keeps the city going, and you're kind of the boots on the ground with all these big CIP projects. So thank you to your team for all that work. On trash and recycling, I think my question was really, given the recycling market, I think the important takeaway for citizens to understand is that we're absorbing the cost of it. So now it costs us money to take care of recycling. We are not passing it on to citizens. I think Alexandria, I read, was actually raising the trash fee essentially, and we are not taking that step this year, right?
Correct.
So I do think it's worth kind of more discussion on, well, where's the market going? What are we going to do? I wonder, though, if there's a kind of PR approach we can take with, because everyone in Falls Church likes to recycle. We're a very environmentally conscious community. And I think if people knew where actually the market was going, whether there's anything that households could do, whether it's decrease the contamination rate, not throw plastic bags in there. I just think there's some things that we can do that makes stuff that we put in recycling better quality. And maybe that'll help bring down some of the costs too. So maybe a good partnership between DPW and OCOM on that. Second question I had is around traffic calming, which is my most common thing I hear about. So I'm glad that this year we are getting that grant money that we've been long awaiting. I think based on the questions we talked about at the last budget work session, it sounds like our staff with essentially Jeff Sykes is sufficient to kind of deploy that money, we hope? Or do we think we need more resources to take advantage of that grant money that's out there to get our way through the queue?
We could always use more, but our plan is to be able to implement this program this year with the staff that we have.
Do we have a sense of how long it'll take to get through the backlog of NTC cases?
I don't have the specifics on that, but you know, with the increase in funding, we think that through the multiple years that we have for the grants, that we will be able to get through that backlog. Yes.
Then every year we've been pushing to kind of get the $200K allocated, and we said we got to wait till this year when we get the grant money, and hopefully we'll get through a lot more of the projects. So I want to make sure that staff time is not the bottleneck. Now that we have the money, we can get to a lot of those solutions. So the second most common thing I hear about after traffic calming is stormwater these days. I think everyone on council actually just got a letter today about stormwater. In light of, I guess, climate change and how wet this year has been, do we think we have enough money going against stormwater projects? Because I think residential stormwater issues are just going to be a common thing we hear more and more about. And I know that the queue is long established in what's going to be solved in the stormwater fund. But given the volume of citizen concerns we've had, I'm curious what the macro picture is. You know, do we think we need more effort in this area?
That one is very difficult. Reason being, we have a 60-year-old infrastructure, which back then the criteria was much different. The homes were much smaller. The impervious area was much smaller. And so now that we're seeing the larger homes, impervious area, we have not increased the attenuation that we should have. And so it is a little difficult. We are playing catch up. The overall infrastructure itself is in fairly good shape. We maintain this daily. We're constantly cleaning and taking debris out. We deseal pipes, but our biggest problem is some of the storms that we're getting. And I know you're aware of these storms. A 25-year storm will flood most homes, which is a standard storm nowadays. When we get these unusual, like we did, I believe it was this past fall, we got the 100-year storm, and we had some houses that flooded. We don't have a perfect solution for that. No one can contain a 100-year storm. And so we're looking at, for instance, a Ren's Branch right now and how we can accommodate, not just trying to save one particular home, but how do we save a multitude of homes in that drainage basin. And so that is our approach right now.
Just know that for the homeowners, it just doesn't feel very satisfying, especially when your home is flooding, that, you know, they're like, gosh, I'm paying into the stormwater fee that's supposed to help, but I know that there's this long queue of projects. And so I don't know whether the city has, you know, a great satisfying answer for people. Hopefully an easy question. In the budget book, I read that there's 4 signal projects that were being contemplated. Do you know where those are, or when those will happen, or what they are?
We have, let's see, Broad and Cherry, I believe, which is starting now. We have Columbia, North Washington.
So they're just upgrading. We're not adding like new signals or?
No, we're not adding new signals. There's one on West Street, I believe. And
Weston Lincoln and
Weston.
Weston Great Falls. Then you got the Broad and Cherry, Washington and Columbia.
So the only new signals are going in are the ones with development, such as Founders Road. There's 2 new signals there.
So the upgrades are just better technology? Are we changing, like adding the louvers, or what's going on with them?
We're doing actual intersection improvements. So this would be the full-blown intersection. Includes pedestrian, ADA features. We put in new mast arms, new equipment.
Great. Those sound like all good things. Well, the one that you probably get asked about is Hillwood and Annandale.
Yes.
What's the latest on that one?
So that one is going in April the 11th. They've got the foundations in. We just received the poles here a week ago. It has taken almost a year to get these things in place.
And my last one, and I will hand it over then, is around the 100,000 spot improvements. So I'm very appreciative of that, because I know that we do come to DPW often with various spot improvements, which I think covers things like the tripping hazards we had on the TJ Tiger Trail, you know, everywhere where we want new crosswalks and, you know, new ped signals and things. To make sure that we're really targeting those high impact, high traffic areas, my concern is that while we hear a lot of squeaky wheels, my concern is we don't want to actually just respond to all the squeaky wheels, which is partly council's fault. But how do we make sure we are comprehensively addressing where the highest impact areas are and use those dollars against those areas so we actually benefit more pedestrians?
Since this is a new program, the idea is to take all of the ideas, request, and prioritize those, and then put a cost to it and see what we can do in that year. So we actually need to develop the program, not just as they come in, just run out and do those.
Yeah. While we appreciate you being reactive and, responding to them, I think my concern is that we just don't want to address everything that just comes up, and there may be some big things out there that we should use those dollars for too.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Z?
Well, don't get me started on stormwater. I know that last year when we had the 100-year event, and I guess it was actually 200-year events almost back to back, that Public Works actually made available sandbags. I know it's not a perfect solution, but made available sandbags to the citizens of this city so they could try to barricade themselves against water intrusion. And when I put out that message to people screaming about water going down the street, I said, well, it's just go see your friendly Public Works. They'll load up your truck and they'll bring sandbags out to you. And it turns out most of those people screaming didn't live in the city. So I got a whole bunch of hate from people that said, why are you so lucky? What makes you so entitled that you get sandbags and we don't? Well, that's what our taxes pay for. Having said that, I think, the subtext to what you had just mentioned was that with respect to our current ordinances is that the way it's written that you cannot contribute more than you're currently, than your current runoff. So that's kind of an out for a lot of people. New developments that if all the water's running off your lot now, that you don't have to do anything. And I would submit that that's an issue for the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission needs to take that up as an issue and to put forward policy that the City Council can consider with respect to how much you mitigate runoff from your lot, whether it's your current house or a house that you intend to build on. So thank you very much, Mr. Director, for bringing that up.
Mr. Duncan?
I feel like the voice of the people is swelling up on this issue with Ms. Hardy, Mr. Z. I want to third the motion. I mean, I feel we have a pretty good process for most of the problems that we confront here, whether it's housing or deferrals or abatements or, the comp plan, approach. I don't have a good feeling about the residential stormwater management issue. I'm as a person who makes his living with words, I am admiring that, Mike, there you said we have not increased the attenuation. That's a great phrase. I looked up attenuation. It means we've not reduced the problem. We have not increased our effort on reducing the problem. And it is exactly as been described by Ms. Hardy and Mr. Z. I mean, new large houses are going in with requirements to deal with stormwater that are, based on 2,000 square foot houses built on acre lots 70 years ago, basically, and that's just not working for us. And it's not anybody's fault. It's just the way the market wants to build here. But I think we do need a planning commission-based, serious process look at this, so that we come in with something more aggressive than the Chesapeake Bay process that we go through now when a house gets torn down and a new one gets built. That's a good process, but it does not seem to be, addressing the problems that we're having. And, some of the problems may be, look, you just can't have a basement if you're going to build a house at this location. I mean, the folks on Spring Street, know that to some degree. And maybe there's other places in town where, given the climate that we're facing now, basements are just not well advised. And if you do have a basement, don't put carpet and, expensive goods down there, because once every, as you say, 25-year storms are now a dime a dozen, you need to live differently based on where we are here in the Gulch. So anyway, all those things land on you in a very urgent way. You know, I mean, we send emails to Wyatt and you, like, what are we going to do? We put a new bridge in, and, you know, they blame the bridge on the backups in their basement. Well, it's probably not that. Anyway, I hope that in May we could open up a front of discussion on this that's leading us to some new regulations that would help all of us.
All right, thank you. Other comments, Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Thanks. So the letter that Ms. Hardy mentioned, a number of us got emails in addition to that letter. And one of the comments by Mr. Ziegler, the issue that they've had, one of the suggested resolutions was related to a state fund that would go towards remediation with the homeowner. So some of the funds that you mentioned up there, does that involve a state fund? Somebody speak on that? I wasn't aware of that. It's a state fund that we can apply for that goes to help provide a homeowner with funding to remediate flooding issues, stormwater issues. Is any of that included in there? Some of the grants that you mentioned?
No,
okay.
it's not.
Yeah, and we will look into that. That's the state government has just changed that fund. Traditionally, it was just used for water quality projects. And so we'll look into the changes that got enacted.
It's good. I'm going to apply for it. My house is flooded 3 times in as many years. So I am certainly well aware of some of the stormwater issues we have. And I would echo fellow councilman here that if there's one issue that the Planning Commission is going to take on, I think it needs to be stormwater management related to both residential and commercial management or development. But more than anything, the residential development, we're seeing it in a very pronounced way over in the Trips Run area of Falls Church, where we already have a pretty high water table as it is. And the amount of runoff, it seems like, is increasingly concerned about it, despite the 25, 50, and 100-year storms. So I think it is something that we need to address, not from just a planning perspective, but also from, we talk about losing mature trees and tree soak and rain gardens and things like that. I think it needs to be a comprehensive look by the Planning Commission. I would certainly welcome that.
All right, thank you. Other comments? I would just like to say that I think that the system of working for pedestrian improvements and the like has really improved over the past couple of years, and I think we're really starting to accelerate the pace of traffic calming and crosswalks, sidewalks, and the like. And so I want to compliment you and Mr. Shields, and I think all of your staff for what's occurred recently. I also do like this idea of a $100,000 budget for spot improvements, although I wonder if it really is anywhere near what you might want to expend in any given year. I mean, how do you feel about that number and what you might do? 100 grand doesn't buy a whole lot these days.
Well, we're doing less engineering and we're doing more in the field with it. And so that's part of the benefit of that. We have standard ADA ramps. We don't redesign those. We have standard signs and markings. We don't redesign those. So we are saving costs there. And so what we're doing is we're meeting our contractors. We have a lot of good on-call contractors. We have jock contracts now, so we can utilize them to get a lot of this done. We just meet with them and tell them what we want. We're working on one right now for Park Avenue with that missing sidewalk piece, and we're doing exactly that.
Great. All right, well, listen, thank you. Keep up the good work. We greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, who's next, Mr. Shields?
So we'll do personnel, and LaTanya Hall is here from Human Resources, and she, along with Cindy, will just present some of our findings on exit interviews and our findings on compensation, some of the data that's been requested. But we'll have a brief report and then any Q&A on that.
So if I could start off with a little introduction and welcome LaTanya, who's our Deputy HR Director. We also want to identify some of the material that is at your table so that you can follow along. You have a handout of a benefit summary. We actually just created this for staff work and use as a one source document, so that we can use it for recruiting, so people can really see what our benefits are, because it's a full compensation packet and not just salary. And so we thought it would be helpful for council to have in one consolidated place the benefits that we provide to employees. You also have a package of information, paperclip that Latanya will go through with some highlights on the exit interviews, metrics, and market analysis that we did. A lot of this grew out of the November budget guidance when you were asking about benchmarking to other localities, what's our turnover rate. So we won't go a deep dive in all of this, but Latanya will highlight it so you can have it as a resource. You also have in your budget questions, do they have that, Kieran, handed out? Yep. There's a regional compensation chart, so you can see where the City of Falls Church salary proposed for the FY20 budget compares to the other localities in Northern Virginia. It has the 2019 actuals and the 2020 projected. And so you kind of see that if some people were higher last year, lower this year, and vice versa, but in average, if you look at the 2 years, the City of Falls Church with what's proposed this year is right in that market. So those are some resources that you have. And the slide that's up on the screen now, just to highlight some of the stuff that's in the proposed budget, as Wyatt mentioned when he presented the budget, the HR director position is proposed to be restored with the FY20 budget, so we have a full-time HR director again. The employee salary merit increase, so it's merit based on performance for general employees, 3.25%. For the police, it would be a 3% step increase and then a 0.5% COLA. And the chart that I handed out is the regional comparison. So then I'd like to turn it over to Latanya to highlight a few things out of the exit interviews and the market study for what we're looking at for recruitment and retention, and then I'll wrap up with some of the school and general government collaboration we've been doing.
All right, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. I conduct exit interviews for our exiting employees. Since I've been in human resources, I've redesigned the exit interview questions so that they could be more open-ended, so I could get some more detailed feedback from our exiting employees. So before you have an exit interview report analysis that I provided to the city manager, and essentially I talked about the tasks that I had at hand and the analysis of my report. So I had 16 exit interviews out of 19 from April to October of 2018. So it overlaps a little with the fiscal year just because in the redesign of the report and the process. So what you will have is some of the reasons or the top 5 reasons why employees tend to leave the City of Falls Church. If you look at your graph that I also have behind the report, some of the top reasons are lack of recognition and appreciation, higher wages and salaries, and the lack of promotional opportunity. And if you look at your graph, you would see that those are pretty much equal. Although on the report, they were able to select more than one choice. So it's even, but, you know, so salaries may have been the initial reason why they decided to leave. As I talked to management and staff, my deal is I'm always curious as to what made employees start looking to leave the City of Falls Church. I think that that's a huge question. And for some, it may have just been an issue in departments, could be work-life balance and so forth and so on. So that's that part of the report. And then if you go to the HR metrics, it's just divided by color paper. So and then our metrics is typically what it looks like in HR. Since I am the lead on recruitment, it's our current open vacancies and internal promotions, which have increased. I think that's been good for the employees because we are so small that we really don't have a lot of promotional opportunities. So what I can say is within the last year or so, I've heavily tried to push departments and have conversations with departments to make sure that we get the information out about upcoming employee opportunities. And so it's working. We've had and been able to retain some top talent. I've done a number of salary analysis during this fiscal year and before, and I'm hoping that with the market study that we will see that there's a need to be a little bit more competitive. Our last huge MAX study was done in 2014, 2015, so we're starting to get under the radar with our peers. So I also have on this HR Metrics, the 3-year turnover report. We're currently, as of January the 21st, at approximately 7.5% of our turnover rate. And as you'll see for FY18, which was significantly huge for us because we're small, is 11.17%. And so if we just go on that current trend at 7.54% currently, we have a problem. We need to work on retention and see what's the drivers in that. Also in the exit review, I have before you the biographical data, because for me it's important to note that a lot of our exiting employees were persons of color. And at the bottom, I have the average stay for persons of color, which is about 4 years, but that's just with this data. I think we need to work on maybe some more things regarding diversity and retention of our diverse employees. And behind that, the HR Metrics is just the exit interview report. It's just the ranking questions. So these are the actual questions that our exit employees receive. And the overall rating for the city's performance was fair. I think we're close to being good. It's just some things that we need to work on. Ideally, I'd like for us to get to the green mark, to become a good organization that employees would want to remain a part of for a while. I know typically the trend is 3 to 5 years, but I've been a 16-year employee with the City of Falls Church, so I beg to differ sometimes. And then lastly was just the market study. I'm not really certain if you all want me to go through it, but essentially my sample size was random. It was 25% of the approximate 149 positions with the city. I started on the lower echelon, for example, crossing guards, maintenance workers, admin assistants, on up to, I think I even have like the library director as one of the positions. The participants were the town of Herndon, town of Leesburg, town of Vienna, city of Manassas. I did reach out to the personnel director in the city of Fairfax, which I use a lot for benchmarking, but they weren't able to participate at this time. So I was thankful for those that were able to participate because it's a lot that goes into it, and I know it's a busy time. So unless you want me to go through all the slides, but they're straightforward. That's my presentation.
Thank you, LaTanya.
Why don't you just give us the conclusions of the study?
Of the study?
Yeah, just the conclusions.
Okay. Well, in the study, a third of the positions studied were under the competitive, the salary comps for the participants that were utilized in this report.
What do you mean by that, though?
Well, for example, the crossing guards, maintenance, admin assistants, the average salary, the difference between those peers in the City of Falls Church, we were paying approximately $4,000 or $4,500 under the sample market. And so I don't know what we're going to do to work to bring that up, but it's important that we find out a way to do so. And there were some mid-level positions, surprisingly. Our planners, our IT staff, although we have worked recently to do salary analysis and make adjustments in those departments, we still may be lagging. So the average was about 4,000.
For that group or all the way across the board?
1/3 of the positions in the
1/3.
random were under the benchmarking. And so LaTanya's recommendation, and doing some research with competitive analysis for market analysis, is we should be benchmarking to be at least 50 percentile of the market basket we're looking at. And 1/3 of our positions are way below that in the 15 to 25%. So when LaTanya talks about our metrics and having done 16 salary adjustments in this last year, as part of our ability, since the 2014 salary review and adjustment is so stale and we were losing people, we actually did some pretty heavy lifting for salary adjustments. And the departments in this year and the budget going forward has absorbed that new salaries so that we wouldn't lose people and we could try to recruit as well. So going forward, I think the city will need to really look hard at the salary. It's good that we're doing the pay raise across the board, but we have some significant positions that are below competitive market. And one of the unfunded initiatives in the HR budget is to be able to do a 25% year review of positions, so every 4 years we're fully assessing them and not getting so outdated and not being market competitive. There's actually some pretty good software systems that are a large national benchmarking basket that is very efficient and not as labor intensive where you're trying to get data from your peers. And that's not in the proposed budget, but I think we need to, and we'll find a way to absorb it in this FY20 budget, because we can't continue to be this outdated, because then we can't provide you and the manager informed recommendations going forward.
All right, why don't we go ahead and open up to questions. Ms. Hardy?
While we're talking about benchmarking, so for the positions that were below our averages, and I know recognizing that correlation does not equal causation here, are those positions that are lower the same that we are also experiencing attrition from?
Not necessarily, no. Because, well, for the ones that are on the lowest end, a lot of that are some of our more tenured staff, so they've been here and they've been committed to us, irregardless of their salary and their compensation. So in the middle echelon, we're watching individuals probably in the mid to higher echelon separate from the city. So it's not, I'm not certain if I've answered your total question, but no.
I imagine there's some jobs that are probably more competitive, like it's, years ago, I think when I first was on council, we talked about how it was really hard to hire planners or engineers for various things. And so I understand we might have needed to pay more to kind of bring people into those positions, and that's maybe where we get out of skew. But I'd just be curious by job type where we're competitive, where we're not. And if that's related to attrition, then we certainly need to address it too.
Yeah, I think for the public works engineers and the IT, we were definitely losing positions because of the salary. And we have a lot more detail that we're, starting to delve in on the positions, but there'll have to be a lot of management work. Salary's a key piece, but as you saw for the reasons leaving, it's also for recognition. It's also for the culture of diversity, for promotional opportunity. So we're really also looking at positions. So if we have a crew leader in public works, can there be a 1, 2, 3? So there are promotional growth opportunities, for example. So there's a lot of good data here, but a lot of more work going forward. And part of it was also recognition. And so we actually just launched this today, so I brought it for council, and I'll send you the email. We're starting the Shining Star Award, because recognition is something we want to do more regularly and not once a year with the Employee of the Year. We're not going to get rid of that because that's too great also. But this way people can send a thank you note to somebody who did a good job. And so we can do it peer-to-peer, but council could also do it. And then we're going to take pictures of this and put it so HR has it to track, and we can make sure we're having equity across the department. and celebrate that way. I have one more bullet before I'm done, but I will stop for market study because you might have more questions before I do the collaboration piece.
Yes, a few more questions. On the attrition data, clearly it looks like FY19 will outpace where we've been. What has been the average turnover or attrition rate? Was it closer to that 6% we saw in FY17?
It was closer to the 6%.
And does that correlate with kind of when we started taking on a bunch of projects, I'd have to say? It's like
Bunch of projects. It was a lot of turnover with the engineers, DPW. So.
And then I'm glad you included at least the data around the tenure of people who are leaving. Just looking at it, other than a few outliers where we've had some really tenured people leave, is the age of people leaving pretty on the lower end? Because that I think has implications of the types of people that we're losing if we're not able to retain kind of the younger workers who.
Actually, I have angst because of not being able to retain the younger workers. Like we've lost a lot of young, talented engineers along the way, and I think that's huge. We need to figure out what we need to do to keep them here with us.
And IT, I think, also has been an area.
Yeah.
Yes.
So very mobile workforce and
Yep.
high skill, high value, and
That's partly why we also wanted to message stronger the benefits, because a lot of people don't realize the value of your pension plan and your health insurance and what the employer is contributing. You all contribute to that. But if you look at that 4-year average, that's under the 5-year vesting for retirement. And so when you're losing the younger people, that pension isn't, in the forefront, even though that and the 457 we know is really valuable. We need to do some more messaging around that. We're also going to do an employee survey of the entire workforce because this is really important data. And it's a high number of exit interviews because we're so small, but it is not the entire workforce. So we're going to do our biannual employee survey and include similar questions, not why you're leaving, but why are you staying, and see what else we can glean from that.
That was my next question, so I want to make sure for the people who are here, that we keep a annual check on them. So I'm glad we're doing that. While you're talking about the spot recognition, do we have money in the budget for spot bonuses for department directors to kind of give out kind of nominal amounts of money to kind of reward like a really good project complete?
No, that's an unfunded initiative in your proposed budget on page 81. I proposed 5,000. And we'd want it through HR so we could coordinate for equity, but so department directors and departments could have those spot recognitions.
Okay, well, I would be supportive of that because I think sometimes, while it's nice to get a little card and recognition, I think a spot bonus sometimes is a nice thing to supplement.
I'd like to say that sometimes salary savings through other or under spendings can absorb some of those spot bonuses, but there are no specific budget line items for that.
And the Shining Star Award was actually a concept developed with HR, Employee Assistance Council, and Communications. And they wanted to do this as a starting point to not do it just because there's no money, but they would love it. Could have a gift card or some little valuable, low-cost gift that came along with it.
2 more questions, I promise. I'm breaking the no questions request from the city manager this year. As tomorrow is Equal Pay Day for women, I thought I'd need to ask this. Do we actually have data on what our pay looks like by gender breakdown and by race?
Not tonight, but I could absolutely provide it.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to kind of look at as well. And on related note, I did have to note that I don't know enough about kind of government benefits, but I would have to say that the paid parental leave is a bit lacking. I know that the federal government doesn't have anything, but I think the average length in the United States for paid leave is about 8 weeks, and we're offering 2. And so that's something that I think is also worth benchmarking in general. So as we benchmark salaries, I think it's important for us to benchmark all the other kind of benefits that we offer too.
And that's actually one that we've only had for 1 year, and it came out of the Employee Benefits Task Force where we didn't have it. And we've had 3 employees take advantage of it.
Is there a correlation? Correlation's not causation.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, that's actually a new benefit that's just been added.
Yep. And as we think about kind of hiring kind of the younger folks. This was where I was 10, 15 years ago. And as people kind of age and get married and have families, these benefits do matter, especially if we want to retain people and if we're losing them to the private world where they're going to get 16 weeks of paid parental leave. That matters at the end of the day versus 0 or 2 weeks currently. Thank you.
All right, other comments, questions? Mr. Lichtenhouse.
Interesting, this is one of my favorite topics. Spend a lot of time at work because I manage a fairly sizable workforce, and we spend a lot of time talking about HR. I think most of our meetings, 50% of them are around HR, because recruiting and retention is unbelievably difficult right now, just across the board where we are in the cycle. So some of this attrition is to be expected. Very low unemployment. Wages seem to be increasing significantly, especially when it comes to technical skills like IT and engineering, so that's not a surprise. However, I've certainly found that the power behind initiatives like D&I, so diversity and inclusion, as well as trying to find that balance between money and purpose, depending on generation and age, can have a huge impact in terms of retaining employees. And so my first question would be, do we have, because we talk a lot about diversity and inclusion here in the city, what's the D&I initiative that we have internally with our workforce? We have one?
Well,
we need to do more.
We need to do more. Like you, I am proactive. I'm in departments. I have conversations with managers. I have conversations with the city manager. For obvious reasons or not, I'm huge on that we are behind the curveball. One of the messages that I've said previously to the city manager, since I have been here for 16 years, I felt, although I haven't done statistics yet, that we were better off 16 years ago than where we are now with our workforce and diversity, and not just at the lower echelon of positions, and that we should absolutely make it a priority.
I think it's important. I mean, and it goes beyond just race and ethnicity. I mean, diversity across the board, and making people feel welcome. And you look at some of the survey and the reasons that people leave, and most of it's around pay and promotional opportunity, which frankly a lot of that I think is tied. It's somewhat synonymous, right? You want to be able to make more money. But I have found that, especially with millennials and even, younger folks, yes, money is obviously important, but that sense of purpose and that sense of belonging early on in their career, especially for that generation, is just incredibly important. And I had an old school boss who's retired now, who used to say, as a supervisor, when you're managing a workforce, nothing says I love you more than money, right? So it was all about, like, if I pay you, that means I love you, right? But it's fascinating to me that there is this younger generation that, yes, cares about maternity and paternity leave, but needs that sense of purpose, and a lot of that comes through, inclusive environments, and sometimes it's just the initiatives. Even if you're working towards more diversity and inclusion, it's the effort and the involvement and getting people involved, which seems to get to have them very, very passionate in that regard. We have an internal employee newsletter?
Yes. Yes.
Where we talk about the job satisfaction, or not job satisfaction, but recognizing people for a job well done, that type of thing, or is it more of just kind of reporting on what's happening?
It celebrates birthdays, accomplishments, promotions. The Star Award will be added as a list. It does the Employee of the Year.
We have employee spotlights.
And employee
things like that,
spotlights. So it's been improving and growing. This last year was the first year since I've been with the city, which is officially 14 years today, that we actually did cultural competence training, sexual harassment training. So I think we're starting there, but as LaTanya said, we have a long way to go and a lot to do.
A couple of things I've found that are helpful from an internal newsletter perspective when you have a fireside chat with somebody that's in a senior level position in another area of the company, just to get to know them a little more personal. So I don't know if it's a digital newsletter or if it's handed out in boxes, but if it's hey, meet Wyatt, and Wyatt talks about his weekend, or David in the registrar's office, wherever David is, or Tom Clinton, whoever it is. That's helpful for folks that may be in a remote area of the organization, to feel a little bit closer and connected to what else is happening. So it seems like something small, but I've found that a lot of people respond very positively to it. So back to the to the question about hiring and retaining and attracting the younger generation. The one thing that I have found that has had the single most impact to get just rock stars right out of college and grad school into your organization, base salary is obviously important, but tuition reimbursement. And I made a decision 4 or 5 years ago to increase our tuition reimbursement program significantly to attract. So if we couldn't compete on base salaries, because around here in DC, especially when it comes to these technical jobs, competing with the likes of an Amazon coming in or some of these other organizations that can pay significantly more than you could pay. There's always somebody out there that's willing to snipe the person that you're looking to hire. But tuition reimbursement for folks that are coming out of college and grad school just absolutely saddled with debt. Putting an attractive tuition reimbursement program out there will allow you to, if you're not quite in that higher band of salary, to attract and retain those individuals. And there's obviously some clawback associated with it if we're going to pay for you to go through school or reimburse tuition, that you've got to stay with us for a certain amount of time. But it gives you time to get people integrated and assimilated, and gives you an opportunity to really take advantage of somebody that could be an absolute superstar that, maybe they only stay around for 4 or 5 years, but at least they get to see the inner workings of the city and fall in love with Falls Church and the staff and the city manager and others. But I found it to be one of the most effective tools to be able to compete, especially in this area of the cycle that we're in, where it's just really, really expensive and difficult to hire and retain employees. So I would recommend looking at that as well, because I think it was $1,800 or $2,500.
It's $1,800.
$1,800. Yeah. I know that money's got to come from somewhere, but instead of chasing high salaries, in some ways that can be much, much more effective. And then the last thing I'll say about this is that I agree with Ms. Hardy. The maternity leave that we have is just, oh man, that breaks my heart. In some cases, 12 weeks I think would be something that would be a safe bet. And then my question is, does this extend to partners and fathers, or is it just one person? Is the maternity leave, if you have a child or you adopt a child, is it just one person,
I think
the mother or
I believe, because that's not my department, but
I think it'd be great if
I believe it extends to both sets.
Okay, so if you're okay.
It's parental, and it's adoption, and it's birth, and if we had 2 employees that worked for the city, became parents, it would apply.
Same-sex couples too?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so there's no restriction. So,
No.
all right, good. So we have no restriction on that, but I would say we definitely need to increase that, because man, we are way behind the time when it comes to that. Some places are giving out like 4 or 5 months now, which is, oof, that's tough to compete with. So anyway, it was great talking with you guys. So thanks.
Thank you.
And Mayor, if I could, just the last bullet, as part of your budget guidance, you did ask the city manager and the superintendent to continue looking at ways that we can collaborate and work efficiently together. And we have been tackling that for the last year on the human resources arena. And I've sat down with the schools team that mirrors our HR team, and we identified 10 contract areas that we've been working on. So Munis, which is our ERP system and all our payroll, employee self-serve, is an area where we're slowly but steadily deploying those modules. We have relooked at an employee assistance service, which is a consortium that actually back in 2000, the city was one of the founding members, and we are not members of it. And so we are rejoining that, and we'll be bringing the agreement to council. It will triple our services availability to employees and reduce costs, so we're very excited about that. And we have out on the street right now, closing April 2nd, long-term disability and short-term disability insurance contract, because that expires the end of the year. So I just wanted to highlight a few of the areas that we've started. And then I think the next focus, once we kind of work through the HR, we'll be looking at collaboration in the IT arena.
All right.
I wanted to end with schools because schools were next.
All right, before we get to schools, I think we got a question or two more.
I just have a question for Ms. Hall. Thank you. On the back of this report, you have some recommendations?
Yes.
Do any of these have a budget implication? Are they just procedure and process recommendations that you're going to aim for next year?
Well, one of them that may have a budgetary is the ability to be able to conduct these analysis annually. Needless to say, it was very labor intensive with a small staff to be able to conduct this market study. But it was very interesting, and I have enjoyed doing it. But I really would hope that the organization would invest in a software where I mean, we could generate these reports and these trend reports in like 2 minutes, and 5 minutes, and broaden the scope of what we're our peer localities and the Washington D.C. region, and just make it more accurate. Why I don't discount my data. I am doing it adjunct, and so I would appreciate the software to help get you guys some more fine-tuned reports that are more easily accessible, and maybe just a tad bit accurate. But what I can say is I was speaking to a vendor, and she did do the market. We just looked at like the maintenance worker and off of the market, the report rather, and I may have been under about 1,000, which made me pretty good. That just as a human being, I was there. I was getting the analysis, and so I think for me that's a budgetary impact, and some of it is just organizational and culture as far as ensuring that we're being fair and equitable in some of our actions.
Yeah, so the software is an unmet need identified in the budget. It's one that we've been investigating, the vendor that LaTanya mentioned that our peers in Northern Virginia are also using, so it has high recommendation. It'll be under 10,000, but that would be what it would cost to be able to do this on a regular basis. With the 1/3 positions underfunded and a competitive and not at the 50 percentile mark, we would need to address that budgetarily. And if we were to expand parental leave or any other type of recognition, there'd be some cost to that.
All right, other questions, comments? Mr. Shields.
Can I just say one thing? Our HR team really has been exemplary, and particularly the last 2 years where we didn't fund the HR director when Diane left. And that was not a popular decision. LaTanya was not happy with me about that decision. Cindy took on this role without really giving up any other responsibilities. I mean, we said she gave up other responsibilities, but in fact she didn't. We're looking forward to a new HR director, but I just want to give thanks to LaTanya for all of her work. She really helped the whole HR team get through this period, along with Megan and along with Cindy. But thank you all.
All right, I've got a few questions or comments. One, let me ask you, what's the goal as far as salary goes? Is it 50% to just be average? Is that our goal?
Well, I think our goal should be to at least remain competitive with our peers. I mean, again, we're not just losing staff because of compensation. There are some other factors. So the ultimate goal is to just provide a culture, a welcoming culture that, is being paid fairly and equitable. That should be the ultimate goal. It's not just about the money.
And looking at the software and the analysis and what our regions are looking at, I think we'd want to be at least at the 50 percentile of the average. A lot of the localities in Loudoun County, when I left there, they were looking to be 95% of the peers. So I think somewhere within, that range. Certainly higher than we are right now, because 25%, 15 to 25% is not adequate to retain. And also you lose there's a high cost to recruiting, as you all can anticipate, and loss of productivity in projects, so.
And I guess I would contrast that with the schools, which have an admirable goal of being pretty near the top, at least as best I can understand it, with teacher salary and other salary. And so, I think the idea of having all people who work in the city be in that same range, I think, is a goal that we ought to be thinking about. And I think not just for kind of part of the folks who work in the city, but I think for all of our city employees to be near the top of the game is fair.
And it might be time to come back. I know in the past in council's work plan, there had been discussion of adopting a policy on what the competitive salary piece would be and have it wrapped around policy, and then we could tie the budget to it. And it's probably time to revisit that now that our 2014 data is showing that we're so out of whack.
I also support this idea of more recognition. I think the city manager and I have talked privately about this. But the idea of recognizing people, find non-monetary ways to reward people, I think is great for everybody. And I like the idea of spot bonuses. I mean, if we're talking about $5,000, hopefully we can find someplace, somewhere to come up with that amount of money, which seems like we ought to be able to find it somewhere or the other. And even bringing people to council to have them be publicly recognized for their good work, I think is a great idea, and we ought to do more of that, or plaques, or whatever it might be. I think we can all do more to recognize the good work that goes on here in the city. So anyway, I thank you guys for what you're doing now, and I think you've got some great ideas you presented to us, and hopefully we can find a way to implement them.
Mr. Mayor, I just have one additional comment, that when we're looking at the compensation package, we look at the complete package. That is, it was mentioned parental leave, but it looks to me like the retirement benefits are far more generous than the private sector is doing these days. So it's important, I think, to calculate the entire package and to make sure that we are performing well compared to other jurisdictions. But I think to focus on any one element without taking the full elements in place might lead us in the wrong direction as well.
All right, thank you very much, and time to move on maybe to our next and last item, at least before we go into closed session.
You don't think?
Mike sat through all of them and he's leaving now? What? Something we said? Yeah.
All right, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor Connolly, members of the council, Mr. Shields, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here tonight and hopefully be the last and quickest of the budgets that you have a chance to talk about tonight, because I know you've got another slate of meetings ahead of you this evening. I want to first recognize our school board chair who's in the audience tonight, Aaron Gill, and Vice Chair Greg Anderson. And tonight, really, what we've prepared for you tonight is very brief, but comes on the heels of what Ms. Gill, Chair Gill, presented a couple of weeks ago very well to the council. So I want to take just a second, and I don't know who's going to advance. Take just a second to very briefly kind of put our budget into context. And there are two ways that I want to do that. I want to start, kind of want to bookend it a little bit with context and start with the future George Mason High School. And just, again, say thank you to the community for their extraordinary investment by passing a bond 2 Novembers ago for the $120 million new high school. We are super excited about that and are deep in the planning, towards the end of the planning phases of that, as you all are aware, but also felt that it was an important moment for us in this budget to be very cognizant of the fact that the city of Falls Church has made such an incredible investment in our community through that passage of the bond, that we wanted to be as responsible as we possibly could in this budget moving forward. And I think what you've seen and what's been prepared is that we've been able to meet that commitment. So our approach this year was really quite simple. We, sort of coming on the heels of the conversations that you've heard tonight, wanted to prioritize our what we consider as our highest priority, and that is the people that are in our schools. We have about 500 employees in the City of Falls Church schools, and those employees are all of extraordinary caliber, are top-notch, and deserve adequate pay for the work that they do, meeting the needs of the students in our community, and really, again, sort of doubling down on what is our priority as a community. And certainly, education is of and among the top priorities. So what you'll see in the budget, just to reiterate what's been presented already, is a very high focus on employee compensation. Additionally, as we approach this budget, we felt, again, for context, it was important this year to try to meet the budget guidance or get as close as we could based on the feedback from the council. And in order to do that, we relied heavily on some reductions and some realignments that have been made possible for a number of reasons. One is that we have seen some opportunities within organic revenue growth, and also our student enrollment projections are remaining relatively steady. And as a consequence of that, we're able to achieve some of those reductions and some realignments within our school budget. So again, kind of going back to the compensation piece, the first piece of it that was very important to us was to offer our employees a step. And that step increase for us is an average of 2.95% for all eligible employees across the system, which is the vast majority of employees. People that aren't eligible for a step are typically those that are at the end of the step scale or at the end of the scale and are eligible for a COLA, but the vast majority of our employees do qualify for that step increase. That step increase certainly represents the sort of deal that we've made in public education. And if you look at all of the surrounding jurisdictions and across the country, you'll see a step and grade system that's in place. And in addition to that step this year, we also are offering would like to offer a 1% cost of living adjustment. So a total compensation adjustment this year for our employees on average of close to 4% across the board. In addition to that, we really felt like it was important for us to take a look at our substitute pay. We did do a market analysis, an internal market analysis using some of our folks reaching out to HR directors across the Commonwealth, particularly in Northern Virginia, and found that we did fall, I wouldn't say woefully short, but I would say that we did fall short in the context of what our substitute pay is. So we are looking at a $2 an hour for both short and long-term substitute pay for our folks that come in. And part of that is in hopes to, one, equalize pay, but the other is to also help with some recruitment of substitutes. We do, not unlike other school districts in the surrounding area, struggle to have substitutes come in. So there is a shortage, sort of in Northern Virginia, particularly around substitutes, which in some ways I think is reflective of the teacher shortage nationally. So if you have some folks that you know that would be interested in substitute teaching, please let us know, because we would like to talk to those folks. We also had to, as part of our budget, pay attention to healthcare insurance premium adjustments. We were projecting a 10% rate increase. We've received the actual rate changes, and we are looking at a 9% increase for Kaiser and down 2.8% from Key Advantage 250. Many of our employees participate in both, but we do find that we are a little heavier on the Key Advantage, so that has worked out in our favor, which that conservative budgeting helps with. And in the end, we do believe that we'll be able to meet the requirements for both this for the school side, and we know that our employees, based on the compensation adjustments, will be able to meet their obligations on the employee side without impacting too adversely their raise. This, by the way, is another place that the city schools and the general government participate together. We do share in the same health insurance plan. So that takes us to the reductions and realignments. Very quickly, I just want to go through those. We do project that we'll be able to achieve about $185,000 in savings through salary lapse due to employees that may be leaving, retiring, and the like. We also are recognizing about $71,000 in other post-employment benefits. We're seeing some people age out of that who don't necessarily need that benefit anymore because they've gotten to the point where they're eligible for Medicare. You'll also see a transitional retirement program. Again, that's another program where people are starting to age out, and we're looking at about a $44,000 recognition for that. And then we get into the biggest realignment that there is in our plan, and that is that we are looking at reducing between 5 and maybe a couple of more positions to help close the gap across the division, not necessarily just teacher positions, but across the division, and looking at recognizing a savings of about $465,000 with those position reductions. It's important to note here that as a consequence of that, we don't anticipate not being able to meet or maintain our planning factors. So our planning factors for our lower elementary, for example, are 22 students to one teacher. And at the secondary and upper elementaries, we're looking at 24. We still anticipate that we'll be able to meet those planning factors that the community expects of us with the reduction in positions. And we also anticipate that for the most part, we'll be able to achieve these reductions through attrition. We've already started to see some turnover. This is the time of year we ask employees whether they're going to be coming back, whether they're going to be going on leave, what their plans are for the future, and we are seeing some employee turnover because not a lot, there are a couple of people that are moving. The next is, in terms of reduction, is we are recognizing $100,000 in non-personnel accounts, and that would be considered a logistical reduction. That, just for purposes of transparency and clarity, that $100,000 is being recognized through the reduction in rent of the new central office that we'll be moving to at the end of June. The last piece that I want to, just for context, because I want to share this with you, and I just actually missed it and felt like it was important for all of you to hear from me tonight, because I do think budgets in a vacuum sometimes get lost. And so I just wanted to share with you tonight some information that we've gathered from surrounding jurisdictions, just to give you a sense of what's happening outside of the City of Falls Church with respect to budget increases. In the end, because of organic revenue growth that we're seeing and some additional monies that are going to be able to come into the schools to help offset some of those realignments and reductions, we are looking at an overall percent transfer of about 2.15%. Arlington County has proposed a 4.9% increase. Alexandria City has proposed a 4.3% increase. Fairfax County is looking at a 4.1% increase. Loudoun County is projecting or has adopted a 7.9% increase. Manassas City 3.5%, Manassas Park 4%, and Prince William County 4.4%. So when you look at those Washington area boards of education schools that fall into the northern region, which we are a part of, we are far and away the smallest percent adjustment in budget comparatively with, of course, Loudoun County being the outlier at 7.9%. But I do want to put that out there just to contextualize the school budget a little bit, because I do think that this was a unique year that gave us some opportunities because of our enrollment changes that we've seen. And so as we think out into the next years, as we see these other school divisions doing their work and what they're doing with respect to percentages, we may face some challenges down the line, but I think we can continue to manage as we work collectively and collaboratively together. So I do want to just end with a thank you, and it is a thank you for your partnership. You all have been really important players and factors in the school budget this year and in years past. We want to thank you also for your investment in our school project. Certainly the work that you're doing to move forward with a comprehensive agreement and the work that you're doing with EYA-PN Hoffman and the city manager is doing certainly speaks to that investment in the new high school as well. And also want to thank you for your support of our budget. Based on the feedback that we received when Chair Gill did her presentation the other night, I wouldn't characterize it as a love fest because we don't want to do that, but I would say that obviously there was a lot of support there for the school's budget, and I think primarily because we were able to meet the requested guidance. So I want to thank you more than anything tonight. So with that, I'll wrap up our comments and answer any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you very much. We really appreciate that. Questions, comments, Ms. Hardy?
Great, thank you. Thank you for the great partnership this year. I think definitely a marked change, which that everyone appreciates. So I think we're all thankful that we were fortunate to have the decrease in enrollment, property values kind of being high, the office savings, the realignments. What do the out years look like? So knowing that we're kind of the anomaly this year when everyone else is growing, 5-7%, is that something that we're going to be facing next year? Like what are the projected enrollments and what do we think our ensuing kind of budgets are going to look like?
Yeah, thank you for that. I'll start with if enrollment didn't change at all. If enrollment didn't change at all, I think it has to be a reasonable expectation for us on a school side to look at a 3 to 4% increase annually. And part of that is for contractual obligations that we have, for employee compensation, for a variety of programmatic issues that we face from year to year. So all things being equal, I really think the organic growth of a school system over time is somewhere between 3 and 4% if there is no additional student growth or generation. We do look at the out years. We are seeing sort of a flattening trend, if you will. with student enrollment right now, but a lot of that sort of depends on what happens with a lot of the development in the city. Because if the kids come, we'll be required to serve them. And if we get 30 kids, that means another teacher, and another teacher is with benefits, another $100,000, which, you know, is a percentage on the tax rate. So we just need to be cognizant of the fact, I think, that overall, again, no enrollment growth, about a 3 to 4% increase, and with growth, it could go beyond that.
All right, a follow-up question. Do we know why kind of enrollment has actually decreased this past year?
We've done some, and it actually hasn't decreased. It just hasn't grown to the extent that we anticipated that it was going to grow, and it's actually happened over the last couple of years. We see sort of, if you look at the enrollment trends over time, the trend line certainly is up. There's no doubt about that. But there are years that it spikes from projection to actuals. And so in the last, say, 7 years, we've had a couple of years where we've been projected at one level, and we've actually come in enrollment much higher. And then 2 years later, it's flipped, and we've been projected in one place, and it's been below the actuals. And so what we're seeing now is sort of those lines coming together. But where we look at our enrollment really are at those transition points. So one, it's hard to factor, first of all, how many kindergarten kids we're going to get from year to year, because we don't have any real way of identifying who's actually going to leave their preschool. They may want to stay at their preschool for another year of kindergarten, whatever the case may be. But so we look at historical trends there, although we do gather some information from Weldon Cooper, and they give us a projection. Actually, that's where we made one adjustment in our projection this year, as we projected down at kindergarten, anticipating fewer students based on the historical trends. The second place that we see some shifts is transition. So anytime a student leaves 5th grade to 6th grade and leaves Thomas Jefferson, goes to Henderson, or leaves Henderson and goes to the high school, we see some moderation of attendance rates at those grades in particular. And we see at some points that it's actually gone down, and at others it's gone up. But we're not seeing an actual trend in those from like a 7, 8, 9, 10-year period. They do fluctuate. Some years we get more, some years we get less, but inevitably from year to year there's a shift. So what we end up relying on, Councilmember Hardy, really is that overall trend line, and looking at sort of from a historical perspective, that they do ultimately cross back the projection and the actual enrollment do end up coming back together.
I'm just curious if there are like broader like demographic trends that are happening. While we were talking about kind of partnerships between the general government schools, I think one thing I certainly appreciate is the effort every year that goes into the where students live analysis, because I think the common misnomer out there is that the student enrollment growth we've seen in past years come from new developments, and I think the data says otherwise. I feel like a broken record every time we talk about it, but I think always looking at kind of where there's housing trends, because that's certainly something that we can work on collaboratively, because this is the group that sets kind of housing policy and decisions around that. And so if that drives, increased enrollment or actually changes it, or if there's things that we can do to stem generational turnover in those single-family homes, that's an important kind of consideration, another good opportunity for partnership. So.
Thank you for mentioning that chart. Our very own Mary Beth Conley, Vice Mayor, helps us put that together. Does a great job with it.
Thanks a lot. Let me ask a series of questions and perhaps follow up. I'm interested in the local composite index and the impact on Falls Church versus Loudoun County versus Fairfax County. If you have that data tonight, I'm interested. You can follow up with it, but that's a constant source of aggravation, I think, because it's based on real estate cost, which, as my wife said, if your real estate costs are high, it means you have less discretionary income, not more. So why should you be punished for that? So recognizing that there's a certain subsidy effect in any state, I think the local composite index has gotten way out of control. So why don't you tell me what the numbers show?
So we're obviously at 0.8,
we're 0.8.
Which is the highest
right.
local composite index you can get. Fairfax is currently at
this is their source.
Their source of revenue. Right. So if their percentage local is, they're about 0.67, is about where Fairfax is, and Loudon is just south of that a little bit, probably closer to 0.62. So we can get back to you with the exact numbers, but the broader point is that they are significantly different from us, and as a consequence, when state revenue comes out, we receive much less of the state revenue because of the local composite index that we have here in the city of Falls Church.
Right, and it's useful to compare not just us to other parts of the state, but us in the immediate surrounding areas. I think there was one factoid a year or so ago that Loudon's household income was almost identical to Falls Church, and yet because of the rigging done by the local composite index, they got significantly more, and that's nowhere near. I'm not talking about us subsidizing the rest of the state going away. That would continue, but it would just be less. We'd get more of it back. Class size is another metric here. How do we compare to the surrounding jurisdictions on class sizes?
We are significantly better than surrounding jurisdictions on class size. And one perfect example of that is having been in Fairfax County not too long ago myself. We were staffing secondary schools at about 29 to 1. Our secondary schools were staffing at 24 to 1. And that, by the way, is the biggest driver of your per pupil allocation and the reason that the cost is high. If we were to change that calculus, obviously the per pupil cost would drop dramatically. But if you look at the Washington Area Boards of Education slides, and I believe I've shared that cost per pupil slide with you in the past, we are one of the highest regionally, and it's because our class sizes are low at 22 or 24 to 1, depending on the surrounding jurisdictions.
Okay, that answered my other question, cost per pupil. Okay, those are the questions that I had. Thanks. Oh, one other thing. Any additional opportunities for consolidating services with the city? Is that an ongoing discussion?
It's an ongoing discussion that we've been having some workout groups. As Ms. Mester indicated earlier, we have a team that's met a couple of times. Certainly Ms. Michael is part of that. So it's ongoing conversation.
All right, other comments, questions? All right, well, listen, thank you all very much.
Just one quick thought.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for all your hard work with us this time around on the budget. Let's enjoy the moment, savor it, and thank you for the heads up on what may be coming down the road. As Mr. Lithinghouse often has said, we are going to face a budget season where organic growth is not nearly as robust as it has been in recent years, in spite of our best efforts to make it so. And who knows what enrollment will do. There may be a year where organic growth is down and enrollment is up, and then we're back to having a lot of good fun here at budget time. But it's a privilege to be associated with a community that puts education at such a high priority. I would love to know, is there any community in the globe, in the IB program, which has standards as high as ours around a population the size of ours?
It's an interesting question, one I certainly will sort of noodle around with. When I think about school, and this is more of a philosophical conversation perhaps and maybe for another day, but I do want to just put it out there for the record, is when you do the comparison of our International Baccalaureate program at Mount Daniel, Thomas Jefferson, Henderson, or the high school, and compare that to global schools, whether it be Finland, Singapore, Korea, I would just remind the council that one of the fundamental differences between their programs and our program is we serve everybody. We take all kids, regardless of race, ethnicity, poverty level, and the like. And as a consequence of that, when I think about the investment this community makes in education to serve the needs of all of our kids, I would put us up against anybody else in the world in a heartbeat because of the work that this community does.
I think you're right. I think we probably have the highest aspirations around the most modest population maybe in the world, which is our unique distinction. Thank you.
All right. Well, listen, we want to thank you for your hard work in getting us to where we are right now. And I think we're at the cusp of a very exciting time for the city. And I think we all I realize this is the jewel in the crown for our community, so thank you for your leadership, and of Ms. Gills and the rest of the school board. All right, thanks much. Let's move on to our schedule and council requests. Are there any issues with that, Vice Mayor Connolly?
I just wanted to call attention to the fact that 1 year from today is the census, and there are several groups that are starting to work in the region. COG is working on census activities, and Mr. Shields is meeting with staff to ramp up Falls Church's efforts, right?
That's correct. We're already getting ramped up.
Thank you.
All right, what else do we have? Okay, we do have a closed session for an update. All right, what you got?
No, we're
Wyatt, I think you know what I'm going to ask you, right?
we're just commiserating on who was going to make the request again regarding the exotic animal ordinance. Yeah.
Did you guys see the
I
article
mean,
in the Post?
it's not on the calendar. What's it?
Did you see the article in the Post over the weekend?
Yeah, salmonella hedgehogs, another
don't-
CDC warning.
Don't kiss your hedgehogs, I think is the
That's-
answer.
Just don't roll around your cat's litter box either. It's pretty. Come on, folks. Also, I see our registrar sitting back there who gave quite the spirited presentation around a full-time deputy registrar. Just want to raise that's something that we need to have a discussion about before closing out budget season. He's patiently waited all evening. No one wants to make a comment on that?
I do. Do you have a sense about what you're going to cut to get there?
I do.
Okay, be interested to hear.
Yeah.
As long as there's no time limit on the, because Phil's cat just turned 23 today.
Was that today?
Today.
20.
It's his cat's birthday? All right, what is she, 140 or something? 108, wow, okay. Did she get any tax relief from the city? Or no?
The house is actually in the cat's name.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were doing.
And the hermit crabs are coming next.
All right, anything else on council requests of import? All
So
right,
with
we do
budget,
have,
actually, so budget markup being next week, right? We're trying to do that in the work session. Do we have a list of the handful of things that we're considering? I think we talked about spot bonus, which hopefully we can just cover. Are there other like miscellaneous things we've covered in the past several work sessions?
There will be some minor adjustments, but those will be like the exact rate on the health rates and stuff that we're going to bring. And then we are going to offset the marginal increase in WMATA. Their budget got approved last Thursday. Those are the couple of things that I can think of, other than anything else the council would.
And so we do have our notes from some of the ideas that the council's had, and so we'll have those, we'll circulate those prior to the meeting, just so you're aware of what our list is, and if there are any other requests, we can add those to the list, just so you'll have it all to look at when you get together on the 8th.
Thank you.
So which way on the metro, up or down?
Up slightly.
But not much?
No.
Okay, at least advocacy helped a little bit.
all right, so unless there's any further comments, why don't we entertain a motion to go into closed session for a brief update about the campus project. Excuse me? Upon a motion made by Councilmember,
Connolly.
seconded by Councilmember,
Hardy.
and passed by a vote of City Council, council went in a closed session pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A. A, consultation with a legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel. This is for contracts for the West Falls Church campus project. Councilmember Connolly?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Snyder?
No.
All right, Z?
Yes.
All right, Tarter, yes. Okay, it is 10:16. Why don't we take a short break to get the cameras down and go back into closed session shortly? All right, we are back. So let's come out of closed session upon a motion made by Councilmember
Connolly.
and seconded by Councilmember
Duncan.
and passed by vote of City Council. Council reconvene in open session. Councilmember Connolly?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Snyder? C?
Yes.
Tarter, yep. All right, it is 11:15. This is certification upon a motion by Councilmember,
Connolly?
seconded by Councilmember,
Duncan?
and passed upon affirmative roll call vote in open session. It was certified that only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed session or meeting by the city council. Councilmember Connolly?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Hardy?
Yes.
Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Snyder? C?
Yes.
Tarter? Yep. All right. Is there anything else you want to say tonight?
Let's go home.
All right, let's do it. We're adjourned.